Okay, at 6 o'clock, I'd like to call this meeting to order. We're going to begin with an invocation led by Councilmember Singh, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Vice Mayor Roberto. Please rise as you're able.
Please stand and bow your head if that is your tradition. I believed in solid ground until I saw the earth in motion, in the winds of steady change and in the ever-rolling ocean. What we know now will not remain the same. We move with change to serve the needs before us. This may interfere with our comfort, but we do it anyway. The majority of the people that we serve and represent are not present in this room. People that don't even know about this room. A room where decisions are made that can affect their lives in the most minute way. Let's keep these people in mind as well as we make our decisions tonight. Amen.
Please stand and face the flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, would you please call roll?
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman McKenzie.
Here.
Councilwoman Parker.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryder. Here. Vice Mayor Roberto.
Here.
Councilwoman Singh.
Here.
Councilman Smith.
Here.
Councilman Testerman.
Here.
And Councilman Thomas. All present, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion on the minutes from our last meeting?
move to approve.
Second. Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Are there any items to be withdrawn? Are there any items to be postponed? Are there any items requested to be added by motion? Is there a motion on the consent agenda?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so time now for my mayor's report. And I want to start my report tonight by taking a moment to remember Cameron Brooks. Cameron was a kind and caring person who dedicated his time to making our community better. He was the founder of the Alliance for Hope, which launched the Living Wage campaign. He served 3 terms on the Knox County Election Commission. He served 2 terms as Knox County Democratic Party chair, and most recently was running as a candidate for city council. His sudden and untimely death came as a shock to me and to many others in our community. My heart goes out to his entire family, and I would like to ask everyone here tonight to observe a moment of silence in his memory. Thank you. Moving on to more mundane matters. I want to make sure you got an email on Friday, council members, that we now have posted the city's proposed missing middle plan on the City of Knoxville website. It's at knoxvilletn.gov, missing middle. And you will also find information on that page about 2 upcoming community meetings. These open house style meetings are going to be on Thursday, September 21st at Emerald Youth Foundation from 4:30 to 7 p.m. So that's Thursday, September 21st. And then a second meeting, Monday, September 25th at the John T. O'Connor Center, and that will be also from 4:30 to 7 p.m. We look forward to sharing more on our plan that was created after months of cross-departmental collaboration and with expert analysis from Opticos. We hope that all of you can make it to one or both of those meetings, and we also look forward to continuing to work with you at the Missing Middle Housing Workshop that you will have scheduled for later this month. We have several important notable events coming up this week, so mark your calendars. This Thursday, we will celebrate the completion of another affordable housing project in the city. The ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new Inskip Flats will be at 11:30 a.m. at 806 East Inskip Drive. We're excited to wrap up work on this $17 million complex that will provide homes to dozens of families. Again, that ribbon cutting is this Thursday, 11:30 a.m. And next week, we have on Monday our 9/11 ceremony. We will be recognizing the 22nd anniversary of the September 11th attacks during our annual wreath-laying ceremony in conjunction with Knox County. That ceremony will take place at the 9/11 Memorial on the lawn of the City County Building. City and county leaders, first responders, and local families who lost loved ones on that tragic day will pause, pay tribute, and continue our pledge to never forget. Again, that is next Monday, beginning at 8:40 a.m. And finally, a quick reminder of our rules of decorum. Those who wish to speak either to a specific agenda item or during public forum should sign up with Mr. Johnson, the city recorder, ahead of time. Also, for those of you who have signed up, council rules state that up to 3 people each may speak for or against an agenda item. Right now, there are several agenda items that have more than one person listed, more than 3 people listed to speak, either pro or con. Mr. Johnson, can you tell me which ones those are?
Mayor, ordinances 10A, B, and C have...
More than 3?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so if you signed up for to speak, the no and vote, more than 3 people have signed up to speak against item 10, A, B, and C. So according to council rules, we're asking that you find a spokesperson to represent your comments, to limit it to 3 for and 3 against. So I recommend that you huddle in the back of the room or in the lobby to confirm which 3 speakers you would like to prioritize on this topic before we get to that item. Are there any other items that are more than 3? Okay. Also, please do not use profanity, and when speaking to a specific agenda item, please remember to stay on topic. Those who fail to adhere to these rules may be ruled out of order and asked to step away from the podium. For those who are listening, please note, you may not disrupt a public meeting from the audience. Those who do may be asked to leave. I appreciate in advance everyone's respect for these rules, and that concludes my mayor's report. Are there any reports of council members? Vice Mayor Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor, and I really appreciate you mentioning Cameron Brooks and having a moment of silence for us, Mayor. I do. My thoughts have been a lot this past weekend on the sudden passing of a longtime friend of mine, Cameron Brooks. And just like the mayor had mentioned, a lot of us, not only in this room, but all over our city, knew Cameron from his political engagement. But the time that I've had to spend with Cameron, I believe that his commitment to Knoxville and his love of our community was much more than that. It really transcended that, and just politics. You know, his life was really focused on helping working people and his love of animals and protection of animals. He was a loyal friend. He was loyal to his friends. He was loyal to his family, his causes, his thinking about animals, putting them first, thinking about how best to care for them. I know I will greatly miss him, and I know many in our community are feeling that loss today as well. I do, when it's appropriate, based on what the family's wishes are, I do intend to bring a resolution memorializing him to council and all of his work for our community. But thank you all.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Council Member Testerman.
Thank you. I do want to echo that and express my sincerest condolences to Cameron's husband, Wes, and the rest of his family and friends. And on behalf of Young Williams Animal Center, we are truly grateful to his service as a board member and for his love, his heart, his advocacy for animals in this community, and for the difference he made. We thank him and know that he'll be deeply missed. I also, on another note, I would like to welcome tonight Sam Osborne and Jack Osborne from Boy Scout Troop 757. If y'all want to stand, I think they're right over here. Jack built a fire pit for Thrive Lonsdale for his Eagle Scout project, and for Sam's Eagle Scout project, he built a Gaga pit for Thrive Lonsdale as well. They're both working on their Eagle Scout application and will be sitting before the Council Eagle Board review either this month or in October. And I also want to give a shout out to their dad and my friend John Osborne, who is also the Scoutmaster of Troop 757. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Moving right along to next item on the agenda, please.
8A is resolution confirming the reappointment of Christopher Sherman, Jeff Stiles, Kira Wyatt, Nicholas Bradshaw, and Officer Steve Taylor to the Wrecker Services Commission.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
8B is a resolution confirming the appointment of Brian Gard and John Wright to the Board of the Public Building Authority.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9A is an ordinance of Council of the City of Knoxville to amend Chapter 7.5, Article 2, Section 7.5-66 of the Knoxville City Code to adjust the composition of the Audit Committee.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded.
We do have a speaker.
Okay, there's one person signed up to speak in favor of this, Mr. Rick Roach. You'll have up to 5 minutes if you can start by saying your name and address.
Rick Roach, Knoxville. Thank you, Mayor. I'm in favor. I've attended one audit subcommittee meeting just to kind of get an idea of what goes on. I asked a few questions. And the composition of the committee, I'm assuming, Warren, maybe you can explain a little bit more to it about the composition, the way it is now, and what you're proposing as far as more citizen input on the subcommittee and the auditing process. Also, to just my comment about internal auditing process. The city does need to have more on-board auditors, in-house auditors. So however that could be accomplished, it needs to get done. When you're doing the external audits and you call in the consultants and everything, it's still better to have people that know the city and know what goes on in the city in order to get a true understanding of what is and isn't getting accomplished with the people's money.
That concludes the people signed up to speak to this item. Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, just respond to the question that was raised and for clarification. This is on second reading. And this is an amendment to our existing ordinance on the audit committee about the makeup, the composition of the audit committee. This would add, and it would put us in line with other cities across the state that are similar to us in size and makeup. And it would put not just council members, but people who are experts in the field of accounting and finance. The audit committee oversees and interacts with the external auditors, which is a required process. We do, the city contracts out for an external audit every year that's required by state law and is turned into the state. But then also we are looking at doing internal risk assessments and audits in line with what other cities do. So this amendment for composition, just to get people on the committee that is best practice, I think I said this at the last meeting, in keeping with recommendations from MTAS and what other cities do. So that's what we're doing here.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
9B is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $6,000 from the Community Empowerment Budget and donating same to Creative Community Cultural Arts to support entrepreneurial training and workshops for youth.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please. Oh, sorry. Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if Miss Audrey Wallace was here or someone from the organization to that.
Is someone from the organization here, Creative Community Cultural Arts?
If not, I just wanted to publicly thank them for the work that they've been doing in the community for many, many years. And they are a very talented group of people who run this organization and who expose young people to different aspects of art and cultural enrichment. And so I'm very pleased to see them getting this this donation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
10A is an ordinance approving the appeal of R. Bentley Marlowe to overturn the Knoxville, Knox County Planning Commission's recommendation that these zoning code amendments to enable middle housing in the city follow the process of implementation as defined by Opticos Design Incorporated in the September 2022 Missing Middle Housing Scan and the Missing Middle Housing book, thereby remanding the requested amendments to the Knoxville, Knox County Planning Commission to consider adoption of amendments to the Knoxville City Code, Appendix B zoning code, to Article 2.3 definitions, to add a definition of dwelling, detached multifamily, Article 4.1 purpose statements, to add to or amend language regarding two-family dwellings, multifamily uses, and accessory dwelling units, Article 4.3a, introduction to Table 4.1, residential neighborhood districts, dimensional standards, to add small lots of records under A and Article 4.3, Table 4.1, residential districts, dimensional standards, to amend the minimum front setbacks for the RN2 zoning district and the interior side setbacks for multiple zoning districts, R. Bentley Marlowe applicant, all districts.
Okay, thank you. That was, yes? Okay. Council members, this is sort of like a BZA appeal. So he'll hear first from the three people who've signed up, 3 people in favor, 3 people against, and then you guys can discuss and make a motion and ask any further questions you may have. So, Mr. Marlowe, are you present? Do you wish to speak in favor of your item?
I don't believe I signed up. It sounds like there's a lot of other people. Are there more than 3 in favor?
Let's see. It's in favor. 1, 2. Who's this? Okay, there are 3 people who signed up to speak in favor, so you don't want to be among them, okay?
I'll let them speak.
Okay. You can have the rebuttal if, since it's, All right, so we'll do the 3 in favor. The first person who signed up to speak in favor of item 10A is Tyler Givens. Mr. Givens, you'll have up to 5 minutes.
My name is Tyler Givens. I live in Knoxville. Yeah, Mr. Johnson's going to need a lozenge and a water before this night's over reading all these tongue twisters. So there are lots of these amendments and proposals with zoning changes tonight. My understanding that this one is to amend language regarding two-family dwellings, multi-use, accessory dwellings, small lots of records, amend setbacks, interior and side. So this ordinance would allow people in residential zones across the city to add additional bedrooms and dwelling units to their properties. The changes would directly benefit lower income folks and homeowners who had been previously excluded due to lot sizes, who might need an extra room for a young adult living at home or for an elderly family member. This proposal is less limiting than what Opticos and the mayor are promoting. The administration wants less market freedom and more restrictions on housing supply. The administration concedes that we need lower income, higher density housing, but wants to maintain control. The mayor wants to maintain a veto power over development via special use approval. We can't let multiplexes invade West Knoxville, and let's not have any more duplexes in 4th and Gill, just the mayor's. Looking at the areas identified by Opticos reminds me of the story of Boxtown, Tennessee. A proposed 49-mile oil pipeline project would have cut through black neighborhoods in southwest Memphis and crossed over the city's drinking water source in the process. An oil company spokesperson described this route as the point of least resistance. Magnolia from Broadway to Rutledge, Alice Bell, East Knoxville, Morningside, Inskip and Fountain City, nothing outside the 640 loop. That's the point of least resistance. As we densify, because we must, the rules should be the same for every similarly zoned neighborhood. The administration should not have a thumb on the scale to keep density out of the mayor's backyard. The city should encourage the well-recognized urban design practice of mixing income residential areas. Packing more density into low-income areas is ghettoization. It is the modern urban renewal. As we grow, as we densify, we should not entrench inequalities. Every area should bear some of the burden, and every area should gain some of the benefit. I yield the remainder of my time.
Okay, the next person signed up to speak in favor of 10A is Dustin Durham. Mr. Durham, you have, please start by saying your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Yeah, so my name is Dustin Durham. Did you say address? Address is 1422 Cornelia Street. Zip code is 37917. All right, yeah, so bear with me, I don't have pre-made remarks, so I'm shooting off the hip. In general, I did just want to speak, not just as a citizen, but as someone who has been lucky enough to serve as a commissioner on the Knoxville Transportation Authority. So I've got to, help us get our new bus system that's coming. I've gotten to work with a lot of great people, including Councilman Smith. And I'm very proud of what we've done with the new bus routes. We are going to be able to provide a lot of people in our city a lot better bus service. We're about to have 4 lines that come every 15 minutes, not quite European standards, but considering that a lot of our lines previously came once an hour. And as someone who used to have to rely on transit because of multiple car issues, I can tell you that frequency can make or break a transit system. Why do I bring that up? Because there have obviously been concerns anytime there is a change. People have concerns with that change, and there have been concerns about certain portions of lines being removed or certain portions of the city not being served as well. And the elephant in the room is just frankly that the way our city has been built and designed does not allow for adequate transit because of our land use. When you allow 75-80% of an incorporated area to be just single-family homes, it does not provide the density needed for transit, for walkability. In my personal experience, it also allows for less freedom, especially financial freedom. I am what you would call someone who is living a car light life. I use a car, once every 2 weeks to get groceries. Every other day, I can walk or bike, and so that's why I am in support of this amendment. I also am in support of what the city is doing through Opticos. I think that is the correct direction, and I applaud the city for doing that. However, I do think that we can go further, and we should. My biggest concern with what the city is doing compared to this amendment is that while it is good to reform many of our currently walkable neighborhoods, again, the reality is most land in our city is zoned RN1, and if we want to have transit, again, speaking from a transit perspective that would best serve everyone, we need to start viewing our city and our neighborhoods not as a museum, but as a living organism, something that needs to respond to current demographics. Overwhelmingly, I think it's 70 or so percent of my generation, millennials, are very okay not only living in missing middle housing, but living around it. I believe now over a majority of baby boomers are in favor of it as well as they age and they want that freedom to walk where they want to go to, restaurants and all of these things. And so, again, I do applaud the city for what you all are doing with this, but I do think that as we move forward, we need to have a critical look at ways we can take this even further, especially because as a transit commissioner, my worry is that we would be operating in silos, and we do not understand that land use does directly affect transit, and that if we redo this bus system but do not look critically at how most of the land in our city is used, our transit system will not be the best it can be. And so for that, I am in favor of what the city's doing, but I view this as a yes and. Like, yes, I agree with what the city is doing, and let's see if we can take it a bit further. Because I think that'll make not just our transit system better, but I think it will make Knoxville more affordable, and I think it will protect our neighborhood character of being a place where you can raise a family and save money and not have to spend every excess dollar you have on a mortgage or rent because we've provided that additional housing. So yes, I thank you for what you're doing, but also let's take it even further. Thanks.
Thank you. The third person to sign up to speak in favor of 10A is Rick Roach. Mr. Roach.
Rick Roach, Knoxville. What the two previous speakers have said. And I would also like to get Attorney Frost to maybe speak to what would happen if by chance, we don't see this get taken care of right now. If it has to go back to Planning Commission, what's that going to look like? If you could offer up something on that.
Council members will have time to ask questions of the legal counsel when you guys get to your discussion. So that's the three people who signed up to speak in favor of 10A, and I'm going to call in order in which they signed up the first three who are signed up to speak in opposition to 10A. First is Keith Britt. You'll have up to 5 minutes. Start by stating your name and address, please.
Thank you. Keith Britt, 506 Knowlton Drive. What's being presented to you comes disguised as affordable housing advocacy. But we cannot separate the message from the messenger here. Mr. Marlowe has proposed euthanizing our homeless population. Mr. Marlowe has referred to people needing a meal as vermin feeding at the trough. These are not the words of an affordable housing advocate. These are the words of a housing profiteer, a man that's just trying to raise his margins by lowering his costs. I am an affordable housing advocate. I was raised in a one-bedroom apartment. I slept in the top bunk while my mother slept in the bottom bunk. And she moved us into that apartment so I could go to the best school in the city. And from there, we moved into a fourplex. And from there, we moved into a condo that shared walls with 31 other units. And I am eternally grateful for that opportunity because it allowed me to grow up in a community and a school system that was racially and economically diverse. And that has paid so many dividends to me as I moved across the country and I went into the college life and I went into my professional life. And that's what I want for my kids. I live in potentially the most expensive neighborhood in this city. And I want there to be more affordable housing opportunities in Sequoia Hills. I want my kids to have the same opportunity to grow up and have the opportunities I did so that they can become more fuller, more empathetic human beings. And we have the beginnings of that. At the center of Sequoia Hills, we have a pretty vibrant apartment community. A house on my block has been chopped up into 5 different apartments, and that's working out great. But that's not what Mr. Marlowe is proposing. What Mr. Marlowe is proposing is an opportunity for real estate investors and developers to double dip. They can buy up properties, rent them out, and then put another property on top of it or right beside it and rent that out too. Essentially, he's trying to double his income without doubling his costs. And planning staff correctly pointed out what this does to a neighborhood is overburden its utility system that's already struggling. It interferes with stormwater drainage, and it absolutely contradicts several vectors of our existing zoning code. Mr. Marlowe's requests are not about affordable housing. They're about raising his profits. I urge you to reject 10A, 10B, 10C, and certainly 12B. And while I don't think the mayor's current missing middle housing proposal is perfect by any means, I don't think it's aggressive enough, it is a step in the right direction. And I applaud the administration for such an aggressive timeline, and I encourage you to take this month to hear her proposal and then hear how the community reacts to her proposal. Because I guarantee you, 99.99% of this city has no idea what Mr. Marlowe is proposing here. Thank you for your time and Godspeed.
The next person signed up to speak in opposition to 10A is Larry Silverstein. Excuse me. If you could come to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Larry Silverstein. My address is 7808 Sheffield Drive, 37909. I'm speaking on behalf of Community Forum, and I am the chairperson of Community Forum. Community Forum has members from many neighborhoods in Knoxville and Knox County. We were very heavily involved with the 3-year public process for RECODE, the rewriting of the entire Knoxville zoning ordinance. We submitted over 150 pages of analysis and comments regarding many issues and attended and participated in many meetings and workshops. We have also been involved with many amendments to the zoning ordinance since it went into effect in January 2020. We speak out on issues of interest and concerns to neighborhoods and property owners. We particularly feel strongly about protecting the character and integrity of existing neighborhoods throughout the city of Knoxville. Amending the Knoxville zoning ordinance affects all property owners either directly or indirectly. It is imperative that any proposed zoning ordinance amendments receive careful consideration with input from the public and neighborhood associations and through a transparent process with adequate notice and time. The zoning ordinance is a complicated document, and at times it is appropriate to amend it. However, one must analyze proposed amendments in one section to see if those amendments will conflict with other sections of the zoning ordinance or have unintended consequences, and to investigate whether they will have a negative impact on adjacent or nearby property owners and neighborhoods. I am speaking today regarding agenda items 10A, 10B, and C, which are 3 appeals from decisions of the Knoxville-Knox County Planning Commission. Council members received a letter dated September 3rd regarding these items, as well as item 12B. We reiterate our position and request that you deny the appeals. The city has initiated a comprehensive public process to consider proposed amendments related to missing middle housing. We agree with the conclusions and recommendations by the city administration and the Planning Commission staff, and with the overwhelming vote of the Planning Commission, that these 3 items should be dealt with during the public process, including 2 community open houses and a city council workshop in the next few weeks. At the appropriate time, Community Forum and neighborhood associations will advocate their specific positions on all proposed zoning amendments, which were just made public in the past few days. I thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you. The third person signed up to speak in opposition to 10A is Jay Schmidt. If you come out to the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 5 minutes.
My name is Jay Schmidt. I live at 4218 Hiawatha, 37919. And I would like mainly today to ask that this complicated issue have a little more time. And just I believe one of the members is going to ask for a continuance or postponement for full evaluation. I'm also a member of the Kingston Pike Sequoia Hills Association, and our board has also voted to ask for continued time to further analyze this. This is a complicated issue, and there's a lot of moving parts. So that is pretty much our position. We'd like this to be fully explored and move ahead in the best way for everyone. And that's the end of our discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marlowe, you have an opportunity for a 2-minute rebuttal.
I think I'm in a unique position where I can say I agree with everyone. I'm asking you to approve this appeal, which will send it back to Planning Commission, and there it will be evaluated and public input can be provided. I was denied that the first go around. Planning Commission did not even address the merits of my proposal, and that's simply what I'm asking for. I followed the procedure. I paid the fee. I went through the meetings. I provided the additional feedback in response to planning staff, and it was entirely sidestepped with an opinion, a policy piece, really. And I'm here asking that you guys send it back to planning so that they can look at my proposed amendments. And I think if it's sent back now, it will probably be heard at the October meeting, I think, maybe, which is the same time that I believe the administrations, and this way it can all be viewed in the totality. I do not believe that this is an either-or kind of situation. I believe some of my ideas could be integrated into the broader version of the administration, and I think together we could get to a broader and better amendment. Thank you.
Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, I'd like to call on Mr. Frost for some clarification. So we have an appeal here. We're not approving changes to the code. We're being tasked with approving the appeal, which is to send it back to the Planning Commission, or denying the appeal, which is to uphold the decision of the Planning Commission.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Ryder. Mr. Marlowe laid out the situation. Planning Commission did not consider either 10A, 10B, or 10C on the merits or the substance, and Director Brooks can please correct me if I'm wrong. They put them off, waiting for, I guess, the consultant to finish their work and work with the city on that. So what Mr. Marlowe is asking, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, is if you uphold Mr. Marlowe's appeal on 10A, 10B, and 10C, you're asking Planning Commission to get right on it, to look at it, to make a recommendation and place it on the Planning Commission agenda for review and for consideration on the merits. If you deny Mr. Marlowe's appeal, you are saying you're in agreement with the actions of the Planning Commission, was this August 10th? And that is to allow the city consultant and the administration to come up with their proposals so they can be considered simultaneously. Mr. Marlowe, is that?
I don't think my proposals will be considered at all if this appeal is denied.
Well, if your appeal is upheld, don't you agree that?
If my appeal was upheld, if they sent it back to Planning Commission, then I believe that they would be reviewing both proposals.
Respectfully, I don't know if your appeal is denied, what's going to happen. Maybe this is for Director Brooks to answer.
If it's sent back to Planning Commission, Amy Brooks, Knoxville, Knox County Planning.
Yeah, Ms. Brooks.
If Mr. Marlowe's appeals, plural, are denied, what would then be the action of the Planning Commission?
The Planning Commission, on their October agenda, will be considering the administration's proposal to incorporate missing middle housing in the city.
So you would
There's still an opportunity. Mayor Kincannon indicated there's 2 open houses. There's also a council workshop. So additional input will be part of that process leading up to Planning Commission's consideration of that draft proposal.
And Councilmember Ryder, of course, council will have its opportunity to share their thoughts through amendment or through the input that we all hear through these upcoming meetings and the workshop. So there's a lot more opportunity for members of the community and elected officials who represent the community to consider the proposal we've put together and any other elements, including elements that Mr. Marlowe has brought up.
Mr. Frost, also, could I ask that you answer Mr. Roach's question when he spoke to the item?
Thank you. Well, I believe if Mr. Marlowe's appeals are approved, that Planning Commission will then consider them on their merits and place them on a Planning Commission agenda meeting. Is that correct, Director Brooks?
It is correct that they will come back before Planning Commission. I would like to note that there in the packet, there was an analysis done by planning staff as well as City of Knoxville staff of the amendments as proposed, just for clarification.
Okay, I'll defer to my colleagues for right now.
Vice Mayor Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. Since I think the main thing we've got to do right now is just understand the process that we're dealing with. So my understanding from Mr. Frost's comments just a moment ago are that planning did not review this on the merits, and that if we deny it, then these proposals don't get seen again at planning. And if we send it back to planning, then they would get reviewed when the city's plans are reviewed. Is that correct, Mr. Frost?
I believe so, Mr. Vice Mayor.
Okay. So we haven't heard this hasn't been heard on the merits, these proposals. I think they should be heard on the merits. I think what we need to make sure of, which, you know, the folks that were up here going through the recode process remember very vividly, was the, you know, transparent public process that we went through, which often kept us in very long meetings, you know, very late into the night. So we definitely need to make sure that that occurs. So I would make a motion to send this back to Planning Commission for them to consider these along with the city's plans at the October meeting. And I think that's a good way to have all of this looked at the same time. I do think that what I have seen, and I'm looking forward to our workshop later this month on the city's approach, is a much more engaged process, and something where we need to make sure that we're continuing to engage the public and making sure they have notice of what's going on here. So I'll make a motion to send it back, send item 10A back to planning to consider in October.
Second.
I'm sorry, could you say the last part of that motion again?
To their October meeting.
Okay. Did your motion include that it be considered in conjunction with the Opticos recommendations, or that it gets heard in the October meeting regardless of whether the Opticos proposals come forward?
I think it should be considered during the discussion with the Planning Commission at that meeting in October, as long as that's when it's coming to planning, which I think it is.
All right. Then I want to make sure I understand the motion, because I think your intended motion is that council consider these proposed amendments as well as Optica's proposed amendments, and that they be considered simultaneously, whether that occurs in October or whenever it occurs, depending on how it gets scheduled.
No, what I'm proposing is that planning review all of these when in their October meeting, and then send to council what they want to. Not that it has to come back to council.
Okay, let's have the motions on the floor, and it's been seconded. So now council can discuss this motion to put it back to Planning Commission, so it's on the Planning Commission's agenda exactly the way it was before, but just at the same time as the agenda where my proposal's on there.
Yes, and that's exactly right. And you know, my preference for when it does go back to planning is that planning look very seriously at what the city's proposal is, because I think that's a better solution for us to be reviewing. But I do think that this wasn't considered on the merits. It's in front of us tonight. We'll send it back to be seen in October along with the others.
I have just a little legal
Yeah.
issue with that.
Mr. Law Director.
Because I think it is appropriate, and it's a fair motion to make a motion that it be remanded to the Planning Commission to consider these. And I think you, in that motion, can suggest that it be placed on the same agenda with the city's proposals regarding these same issues. But I don't think it's within the appropriate power of this body to set the agenda for the Planning Commission. So I think they will follow your suggestion if you suggest that it be considered at the same time as the cities. But rather than say it is going to be required to do that, I think that oversteps your powers just a little bit. And so if you would amend your motion to say that you move that it be remanded to planning with the suggestion that it be included on the same agenda as the city's proposals on middle housing, then I think you'd be good.
Well, I will amend my motion to remand this back to planning for their October meeting with the suggestion that they consider all of these proposals at the time that the cities are presented.
Second.
Okay, so this is for the motion that I think that you retracted, you're just amending your own motion, so it's a substitute motion?
Yes.
And the city recorder has asked, is that motion just with regard to appeal number A, or is it with regard to all three?
I think it should go to all three, and so to save us some time, I'll just make the motion for all three.
Second.
Can we do A, B, and C all at once? Okay. Okay, council members, so you want to try to do this amendment for A, B, and C?
Yes, Mayor.
Okay.
Probably should suspend the rules.
That's on, you all want to vote to suspend your rules to do it on A, B, and C all at once, knowing, that there are people signed up to speak on A, B, on B and C as well.
I think, each of these items, we're going to hear very similar issues. So I think voting them all at the same time, these does not end these appeals. They will be considered again on the merits, and all of this will go back to planning. So I think that's a fair way of going. So I don't have a problem with having A, B, and
Okay,
C.
is there a motion to suspend the rules, so this motion could be for items 10, A, B, and C?
Motion to suspend the rules for A, B, and C. Second.
Okay, motion has been made. Now, we're back to Vice Mayor Roberto's, voting on the suspension of the rules. All those in favor of suspending the rules to allow this motion to be the same for item 10, A, B, and C, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the rules have been suspended for this instance, and now we're talking about the motion on the floor. I'm not sure who was signed up, who had their light on first. Ms. Testerman?
Okay, so
No?
we're still in public,
We're talking
On that
about the
case.
motion, which is, to send it back to Planning Commission to consider at the same time as they consider my administration's proposal.
okay, well, I just had general comments on this
Okay.
agenda item.
That's germane.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to say, I see someone here who's striving to do two things. First is finding a way to simplify a very complex and sometimes broken system to help make doing business in the city easier and more desirable. And secondly, address the lack of missing middle housing that we have discussed ad nauseum and given a great deal of lip service to during these meetings. I do get frustrated continuing to hear that developers are pushing their own agendas for self-enrichment. And I've said it before, there are a lot of developers here that are dedicated to addressing the housing problem. And my question to those people is, who do you propose is going to be responsible for building said housing if we're ever going to create a path forward and generate some real solutions? We're in a very different time from Recode with a whole new housing landscape and crisis from 2019. And Recode was always intended to be a living document, and we have to evolve and resolve new and pressing issues as our city evolves. I am not saying that all that's being proposed in Mr. Marlowe's amendments is perfect or even the most viable recommendations, but a lot of it gets in the weeds, though that's not necessarily a bad thing, but these amendments are complicated with a lot of details, and they do raise some legit concerns to be considered. But I do feel there's someone who, genuinely a concerned citizen, has expertise in this space, has invested a great deal to put together some real and actionable items, deserves to have a productive and constructive analysis of his proposal with thorough feedback on why a proposed amendment is or is not conducive to the overall objective. And there are provisions for a reason that allow for due process and review of any ordinance changes, ideas, suggestions that members of the general public bring to the table and pay substantial dollars for. As we've heard and we know, the administration is bringing their own recommendations, and that also include good ideas, and we'll be discussing through the workshop, through these public input sessions over the coming weeks. But we talk a lot about public process. We talk a lot about neighborhood advocacy and transparency. And I would presume, we'll at least consider comments from all those sessions. So I'm not sure how or why these proposed amendments are any different. They've just shown up in a different format in the way of ordinance changes. So for that reason, and I'm pleased we're moving in that direction to see Mr. Marlowe's proposed ordinance amendments go back to Planning Commission alongside the administration's proposal, and see if we can't. There can't be a collaboration of ideas and recommendations to complement and strengthen the Optico's proposal. I'm not sure why this is an either or. Both are aimed at accomplishing the same goal of more missing middle housing, and both were crafted as a result of the Optico's consultation. But I'm a believer that we can find more alignment between the two and work together to leverage the best possible outcome between these two. So,
Thank you. Just a point of information, I don't want to have the Optico's recommendations are helped inform our proposal, but it also has the input from our engineers and plans reviews and inspections, and also many members of planning staff, including Director Brooks and Lindsay Crockett, who are sitting at the table. So it's informed and, has the expertise of that outside entity, but it also is unique to Knoxville and serves our needs, and just wanted to mention that.
I should say Opticos inspired. So,
Council Member Parker and then Mackenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I have somewhat of a procedural question, but along the same lines of what everyone else has said, it makes most sense to me that these discussions about Mr. Marlowe's proposals happen at the same time as we're anticipating more proposals coming from the administration. And so procedural question is, I would like for us to defer this to our workshop at the end of the month, as well as sending it back to planning. Procedurally,
you would not need to include that in the motion. If you as a council, council runs its own workshops. So it's up to council to decide whether they want to have a workshop while it's going forward and planning at the same time. So you would not need to add that to the motion procedurally. You just have to convince your colleagues to add it to a workshop.
well, I'll use this second to just encourage us to be open to listening to this. And I also don't know if there's an amendment that's needed on the original motion, but to ensure clarity moving forward, there have been some changes and amendments to what's even before us. And it should be the most updated proposal from Mr. Marlowe that goes back to planning. So if that's what's before us, then that's what goes back to planning. But if there have been, if that doesn't include what we just got today.
What you got today is the 12.
Mr. Marlowe, you can't speak unless you're recognized. Thank you.
Jeez Louise, Mayor, come on.
Well, we're just listening to the law directors. who actually know about procedure. So, Mr. Law Director, could you speak to that, please?
So if Mr. Marlowe wants to make amendments to his proposals that he thinks makes them better, certainly when it goes back to planning, he can offer those amendments at that stage.
Awesome.
Does not need to do it here because you're not going to consider them on their merits anyway.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you for that.
Councilmember McKenzie.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to address Mr. Marlowe. Mr. Marlowe, did I hear you say correctly earlier in this conversation that you felt like you were not given due process?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Could you expound on that?
It was, I believe, the plain language of the ordinance that allows a citizen to bring forward a zoning amendment implies that the Planning Commission will judge the merits of the proposal. And I do not believe that staff's recommendation touched any of the merits of my proposal. They merely suggested a policy move without talking about my amendments, whether they agreed or disagreed or wanted to modify them at all in reference to 10A, 10B, 10C.
Thank you. I also want to address someone said earlier, which I agree with, is that we're discussing things as it relates to this zoning, that there are people who are living in neighborhoods and communities, residents and homeowners, who have no clue about this today. And so I do think giving it more time for people to become aware of it and to give feedback is critical as it relates to this, because again, while RECODE is a living and breathing document, these are decisions that people will have to live with for a very long time, and it will affect their communities and the demographic of their communities. And so I do think it's important that we gather that feedback, and so I'm in support of sending it back at this point based on those facts.
Councilmember Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. What I didn't want to happen tonight was for this to just get dropped and be done. So thank you, Vice Mayor, for continuing the process. I know there's a lot of work that will go into this before it comes back to us, and it may end up back at planning again. My concern is, have we thought about long-term, and I think this will come up at the workshop, have we thought about long-term how to keep moving this forward? I think the administration's plan addresses a very small piece. It's a place to start. Maybe some of these will be incorporated. Maybe some of them will expand what we're doing. But then what do we do next? Are we talking about having a stakeholder group that, much like RECODE, got together, and that's a way for the community to be involved?
In the email that Cheryl Ball sent you all last week, it contained information about some upcoming, community meetings, but also, and we didn't highlight this because we just, it's just on the webpage, but this, I consider this phase one of future phases. So we're starting with missing middle housing, and we're doing it informed by a lot of people, more people from the community that we've heard from already, but more to come, but also people from engineering, from plans, reviews, and inspection, from planning staff. And so phase one, missing middle housing, this stuff, as we've all noted, is complicated. And so to try to do everything all at once might, be unnecessarily complicated, even though we want to go in a sustainable manner with community input.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That we're doing little piece by little piece, but we have to keep on. Like, I want every month something new to be coming to joining this. This is a crisis. So what is our ongoing process is what I'm looking at. Maybe a stakeholder group so the public can be involved, but I don't want this to be done.
No, I agree. Ms. Ball, did you want to speak to that? I know we're still, we've been focusing on missing middle, but other phases are to come, and other, how to keep it going.
Yes, thank you. We do intend to have, we have a list of a multitude of things that we can continue to move forward on. Pretty important to go through this community process that we intend to launch over the next several weeks. That is going to largely inform the next steps that we take, as well as the conversation from this body, as well as Planning Commission, to help us understand the interests of our community, the interests of this body and that body, to make sure that we're putting forward the best plans that make the most sense for our communities. The planning staff have been essential and involved in this process with us, helping us develop this plan from the beginning, and their expertise has been invaluable, but also the expertise of our team and our Opticos folks have all been involved up to this point.
So you're saying the public process, the 2 meetings that are coming up, will inform the next few steps?
Oh, most certainly. I think that they will inform how we move forward with, they're probably
Ms.
not
Ball,
the
my
only ones.
concern
They're probably
is-
not the only
My
ones.
concern is that certain people come to meetings just like this, and so it's not representative of the community altogether. I mean, how many people here are renters? I don't see that community. I see 1 or 2 hands up, right? So how are we going to get this out to here from people who are being evicted right now, from the people who are being most highly impacted? That's the group we really need to include, and I know that is a very difficult thing to do.
Well, Ms. Singh, I think that's an excellent point. And when we have these upcoming meetings, one thing can be like, what is the best way to engage people beyond, in addition to, are these community meetings, more community meetings like that, a stakeholder group that makes sure we have people who represent all segments of our population. Those are things that we can consider and do. But I hope that we do that also while we consider some changes along the way, with the community input. So, we're trying to address the urgency of this and not go so fast that, people don't know what's going on, but not wait around till, everybody's not going to know what's going on, because that's just the nature of land use decisions. People don't usually, pay close attention till it hits their backyard. But yeah, I think those are some great ideas, and maybe we can hear from the community at these upcoming meetings and at the workshop. And if a stakeholder group is something that makes sense, then certainly.
I think we should try more than just these 2 meetings, is what I'm saying. We need to somehow go into the community and get more input. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Just 3 quick comments and a question. Mr. Marlowe, thank you for bringing this forward. I don't agree with all the pieces in here, but your persistence over the past 12 to 16 months is admirable. I think you've raised these not just in the past month, you've raised these, I've been copied on plenty of your emails. So I know that your voice, just like everybody else in the communities, needs to be heard. And I think there's been too slow a response to a lot of these ideas. I also want to say, as we kind of continue or kind of really go into an extraordinary public phase of missing middle housing, I can only speak for myself. I understand the urgency of the housing crisis. I've rented, I've owned, everything in between. I've borrowed couches. And so I understand the urgency that some of you are facing, that many people in our community are facing. I also meet with 10 neighborhood organizations just about every other month. And so what I also know is that people need time to hear things over and over and unpack what their first gut reaction is. Knowledge, education, people need to work through those because their first impulse may not be where they land. And so I do think while there's some merit in these, I think public process is really important, and it requires extraordinary public process, not just a couple meetings. I would agree with Councilwoman Singh. So people need time to work through these things, and I think I will compliment the city staff. The website that's been put out is a good start of illustrating what missing middle housing is. I think the more people understand it, the better progress we'll make. And then I'll end with a question. I just want to make sure I understand the right expectation for individuals who submit ordinance changes to Planning Commission. So although we went through a lot of discussion earlier, can individuals bring ordinance changes to Planning Commission? I guess, Mr. Frost, I'll throw this frisbee to you. And what should be their expectation when they bring ordinances to Planning Commission? Because I don't want this to happen again.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. I believe this falls under Article 16, 16.1, Part
B, initiation, City Council, Knoxville, Knox County Planning, City staff, planning staff, or a property owner in the city, or his or her designee may propose a zoning text or map amendment. After that, you get into Part D, which lays out what's supposed to happen when someone, whether it's Mr. Marlowe or the city or a property owner, goes through, and how it eventually gets to City Council for consideration.
So just to maybe follow on, there's supposed to be a yes or no vote of some sort by Planning Commission for these matters?
At some point, Planning Commission, Part D1B, Romanet I, or Romanet 1, for zoning text amendments, Knoxville, Knox County Planning Commission must recommend approval with modifications, or denial of the application.
Thank you. So the same would apply to rezoning, for example?
Yeah, planning is supposed to make a recommendation to the planning commissioners who vote, and all rezonings are approved by City Council.
Thank you.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, my main concern here has been expressed somewhat by my other council members, but it is that all zoning proposals, whether it's this one, ones presented by the administration, are properly vetted by the neighborhoods and the citizens, and that they have a complete opportunity, however long it takes, actually. We don't want to unduly delay, but these affect people's lives. So any of these zoning changes that are being discussed need to be reviewed. My main concern is just that the citizens have a chance to understand it and weigh in and give their ideas to make them better. I don't have much of a problem, I suppose, remanding it back to the Planning Commission with the understanding, though, that I'll get another look at this if it comes back to us. So.
Your light, you're done, okay. Okay, seeing no other lights on, all those in favor of this consolidated motion on items 10A, B, and C, everyone understand what you're voting on? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
11A is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Walker Consultants to provide an analysis and recommendations for a strategic downtown Knoxville parking plan in an amount not to exceed $87,225.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Okay, someone signed up to speak. Mr. Givens, you signed up to speak on this item.
Now, I was just going to crack a one-liner and go, but since you deleted all that other time for people to speak, I'm going to go ahead and use my full 5 minutes now. So, Tyler Givens, I live in Knoxville, and I am glad that we are finally considering a parking study for downtown 3 years after countless citizens raised concerns about how the taxpayer-funded baseball stadium was going to impact existing residents and businesses. So glad we're finally getting around to this. Now, parking requirements as part of missing middle. Sorry, I'm scrolling back to my comments from previous things here. So, public meetings. I wanted to respond to that. So last week, I testified at the trial of a local activist who was arrested at a public meeting. The cause for that arrest was later dropped. So public meetings are free and open and welcoming to all. Also, I wanted to have a point of order, which I'm not allowed to do from out here. The chair just literally yelled at a public speaker for speaking without being recognized during Councilmember Parker's time, and then he spoke twice without being recognized during Councilmember McKenzie's time. So if you're going to snap at citizens for not following the rules, please be consistent. Speaking of the rules, if I start talking about the racist history of setbacks, the mayor may say I'm off topic. So I'm going to talk about Opticos. The consultant who provided the original plan is cited in the agenda item that we just skipped over a whole bunch of. The mayor is correct that the Opticos plan is not solely based on Opticos. A lot of the Opticos' best suggestions were thrown out. The administration has a pattern of using third-party contractors to create justifications rather than listening to best practices and community input. In the case of the stadium, we used the unreliable CSL to do cost-benefit analysis, and before construction had even started, we had already taken an additional loan from Randy Boyd to cover those cost overruns. During the police chief search, the administration used PERF, an agency that claims to value transparency in policing, to conceal records. Based on this pattern...
Mr. Givens, please keep it to the topic of parking,
Do you want me to repeat the thing? Stop the
11A.
time, please. Please stop my time. Mayor, the rules of decorum are not, this is a limited public forum. You're not allowed to limit me on the content of my speech. I know you think you are, you're not. So if you think you are, get the officers and pull me out. All right. So, based on this pattern, I don't automatically assume that Opticos analysis filtered through the lens of this administration is reliable or unbiased. From Karen and Daniel Paralek, the founders of Opticos Design. Quote, "The economic benefits of missing middle housing are only possible in areas where the land is not already zoned for large multi-unit buildings." Let me repeat that. Missing middle housing is only possible in areas where the land is not already sized for large multi-unit buildings. Zoning for large multi-unit buildings drives up land prices because large multi-unit buildings pack more units of housing per acre and generate a better return on investment than the kind of missing middle that the city is pushing forward. Quoting the Paralex, again, the founders of Opticos, the company that came up with missing middle, quoting them, "It's a fact that building larger buildings, say 125 to 150 unit apartment or condo building, provides easier to identify and often larger cost efficiencies than building a 4, 8, or even 16 unit building or series of these buildings. Overall, a 50 unit project requires about the same amount of development work to execute as a 150 unit project, but the margins are lower. So a 50 unit missing middle project requires about the same amount of development work to execute as a 150 unit mid-rise apartment complex. And it provides a worse return on investment. By focusing too much on missing middle, such as ADUs and cottage court style developments, Knoxville may miss an opportunity to densify in the most resource effective manner. Mid-rise buildings are slightly more expensive to build per unit, but they are also more valuable and durable assets overall than Opticos-style missing middle. They are also more economically and environmentally friendly to heat and cool and handle water and sewer capacity. Larger constructions also offer more opportunities to combine infrastructure improvements or city services like additional bus stops, sidewalks, and better stormwater control. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. Is anybody from the consultant here?
No.
No. All right. Mr. Brace, I'll lob these at you. I'm excited about this. I think we need it. I think there's a lot of creative ways cities are dealing with parking now. Saw some reference in our packet to parking management. Will they be considering recommendations such as market rate charging, automated ground sensors, privately owned parking lots? Will some of those kind of newer recommendations be part of this?
I'm going to let Ms. Ball, she's been the lead on this project, but in general, this is going to be the plan that will drive our parking operation and policies and regulations into the future. So we've been essentially operating on a system that's been in place for, over a decade. We've made tweaks along the way, but this is really a detailed look so that we can look out into the future 5 to 10 years. But I'm going to let Ms. Ball look at or answer the detailed question you had.
Thank you, Councilman. I don't think that we know exactly what the recommendations are going to be from this consultant at this time. That's part of the process we intend to go through. So I don't know that I can get specific about which particular items they may or may not recommend.
Sure.
I think that is part of the reason that we want to go through this process. We have all seen other cities do great things, but these are the experts in the field and have done this literally in thousands of cities across the country. And they do have those best practices and examples and great management expectations and best practices for us to follow. So that's what we're hoping to glean from them.
Okay, thank you. I have two more questions. I noticed that community outreach is a part of the scope of work, and I think I saw a minimum idea of surveying residents, and I think there was a reference to a stakeholder group. I didn't see residents of Fort Sanders. There's a neighborhood association there, so I would just ask that they be included or added to that stakeholder group. And then the last question I had was, given all of the development along the south waterfront, why did we limit this to downtown and just come across the bridge briefly on Blunt Avenue?
As we were looking at the geographic areas that the city manages property and where we have residents, visitors, and out-of-town visitors as well as local residents coming to the downtown area, we were centering the study on the amenities located in the downtown area that pull in larger volumes of people. Everything, I think there's a list that you could see in our proposal of all of the event venues that are targeted in that specific geographic area, as well as available parking that the city of Knoxville manages, or through our PBA partnership, we have control over managing as well.
I think we also thought that, we had to draw the boundary at some location.
Sure.
We believe that what we will gain from this can be taken to other parts of our community. And so I think we drew the line because of the assets we had, but we also know that the lessons that will come out of this, we can start to pull those into other parts of town.
Okay, we've had long discussions about
Parking, yeah.
different opinions around the south waterfront, and I wish we had more parking. Please don't add parking. And so we'll look for recommendations that we can stretch across the river. So thank you.
Councilmember Singh, you're light. You're okay. And Council, before I go to you, Mr. Thomas, forgive me, I should have at the beginning introduced, you might have noticed there's 3 new people joining us this evening. Cheryl Ball, Chief Policy Officer, Rebecca Jane Montgomery is Chief of Urban Design and Development. They've been with the city many years, but just gotten promotions. And then Grant Rosenberg is our new COO. It's his absolute first day on the job, so if you have any hard questions, he's your guy. Anyhow, sorry, I meant to do that at the beginning, and thank you for being here. And Mr. Thomas.
You got lucky.
Yeah. Mr. Thomas.
I simply think it's important to acknowledge, though, about parking, what the city has been doing right over many years. The parking garages are quite expansive. The free parking on nights and weekends. There's available parking on the streets also that is free in various locations, some of them under the viaducts that aren't used. The system now of meters, which are very clearly marked about when they're available and when they're not. So we've done some really good things, I think, about parking. And I think that's one of the reasons why downtown has done so well in the last few years. So if we do a study and we have recommendations, I'm going to look at it with care to make sure that they don't change some of the things that we are actually doing right. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11A is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an easement agreement with the Historic Tennessee Theater Foundation to allow existing and proposed features of the building located at 612 South Gay Street to encroach into the public rights-of-way of South Gay Street and Journal Place.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11C is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with Resource Environmental Solutions LLC to provide professional engineering design services for the Holston River Park Stream Bank Stabilization Project for an amount not to exceed $397,184, funded with the American Rescue Plan Act grant.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11D is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute 4 facility encroachment agreements with CSX Transportation Incorporated as part of the Middlebrook Pike Advanced Traffic Management System project for a total cost of $29,400.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11E is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to apply for, and if awarded, accept, a grant from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation in an amount of $748,517.82 with a city match of $39,395.68 for stream restoration efforts in Edgewood Park.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11F is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute any and all documents necessary to accept $20 million from the state of Tennessee for the South Waterfront Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge project.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. We have one person signed up to speak in opposition to this, Ms. Tina Sparks. If you'll come to the podium and state your name and address for the record. You'll have up to 5 minutes.
My name is Tina Sparks, 37917. And yes, of course, I have signed up tonight to speak against this resolution. I had to remind myself when this all started, 2006. I went back and I was looking at some articles and some things that were written and talked about and debated here. None of you all were here. Well, Mr. Frost was here in his as a council person at the time, of course, but I don't think any of the rest of you were here. But you know, this for some of you might look familiar. 2006 Knoxville South Waterfront Vision Plan. I have to read a little bit of this. Imagine what we can do by implementing the plan. We will be able to stroll along the river, go kayaking, take the family out for dinner and entertainment, live and work right across from downtown. We need to remember that this vision plan describes a 20-year strategy for revitalization. There's that word, revitalization. We all know what that means. People out here know what that means. By the way, those were the words of our then mayor, Bill Haslam. It's a lot of money. $20 million is a lot of money. And there was a reason why the federal government, Rebuilding American Infrastructure Sustainability Equity Grant. There's a reason why this city did not get the federal funds. I don't know what that is. I have a feeling. I have a feeling that it might have something to do with merit-based. That's how the federal government determines who gets the money from these grants. Merit. That's an important word. Merit. to hear those, to read those words, and then to hear UT President Randy Boyd speak about the Nayland Entertainment District. Oh my God. The Nayland Entertainment District. I have a feeling the federal government, maybe their blood doesn't run as orange as some of you all. I really think that. It's just a lot of money that could be spent. The merit of that money could be spent in so many different ways. So we got $20 million that was supposed to have, was initially, okay, the $20 million has been floating around for a minute. And I just have to say that we can spend our money better. And that's what the raised grant is supposed to do, to spend the money wisely. That's what it says. That's what they say on their page, that the transportation raise enables DOT to examine these projects on their merits to help ensure that taxpayers are getting the highest value for every dollar invested. And taxpayers don't have to, the taxpayers and the public in general. I know that nothing I am going to say or nothing that anybody else who gets up here to talk is going to sway you all in any way, but you just got to know that I know, and you know that I know, and they know, and you know that they know, and we got to stop this. We got to stop this.
Thank you, Ms. Sparks. Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a significant piece of the South Waterfront Vision Plan from 2006. One of the things that I had to do, since I didn't have my fingerprints on it and representing this district, is I had to read that as many times as it took to make sure I was aware of all the pieces of it. And this bridge, although new to a lot of people, was referenced 15 times in that plan. So this is not a new plan. I'm really optimistic about this for a bunch of reasons. One is it will be another connection between South Knoxville and the rest of the city. It will reduce the amount of cars on the road, which I think most of the people in this room will appreciate and understand the benefits of that. It will allow for more recreation access to the Tennessee River, and it will provide more amenities for existing residents of the South Waterfront Neighborhood Association and Vestal, both of which have been involved in shaping what happens where the bridge lands on the south side. So I did have a few questions, and I have more questions about the contractor who's on our next agenda item. I guess Mr. Brace or RJ, whoever wants to take this, maybe the new guy. Anybody?
Ms. Justice is the lead on on these issues.
Ms. Justice, what can this money be used for? Does it sit aside if we don't win the next raise grant? What else can it be used for? Do we have to return it to the state if the bridge never happens? Explain the restrictions on these large sums of money.
Sure. This is an appropriation by the state to support the continued outreach, planning, and design and construction of the bridge. So those are the uses. So it's really just to support the general intent of making this project happen. This is not a project that we have the capacity to fund with local dollars. So this is really an essential component of our funding mechanism to achieve the bridge as a project for our community. With our raise application, we received a lot of high remarks. Our only weakness was really our committed funding. So we feel very confident that with the committed funding from the state appropriation, that our 2024 application will be strong.
Thank you. How soon can we start spending some of this money?
We have a request for a initial drawdown of $1 million to the state, and we're going through the process now to transfer that money.
And what will that money be used for?
The same thing, the outreach, the planning, the design, and the construction of the bridge, but the initial draw will be the subsequent planning with contracts like CDM Smith or public engagement events, et cetera.
Okay. I don't have any questions for CDM Smith that are technical in nature, so
Mhm.
I'll just go ahead and give it a whirl here while we're at
Sure.
it. You know, with what I said earlier, while this is a lot to be excited about, the thing that's very important that I've learned through the vision plan and seeing plans compared to reality is the importance of following through on a vision plan and seeing it through. And so the most important part for me is how this benefits existing residents. Yeah, in terms of adding amenities and mitigating unintended consequences. And so we've met multiple times and had many open forums with the Vestal neighborhood, the South Waterfront neighborhood, and those meetings have been productive. I think I mentioned earlier related to missing middle housing, people need to hear it, understand it, have legitimate concerns, raise those, and the plan needs to adapt based on those concerns. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows that those conversations are ongoing. Those neighborhoods are working on a list of priorities or guardrails that they want to make sure are woven into this. And I just want to make sure that I can get an affirmative that those types of concerns and principles will be woven into where the bridge lands on the south side.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Roberto?
Thank you, Mayor. Chief of Development, Justice, I guess my first question is, in accepting this money, what obligations come along with it?
There's no contract for this money. It's just a direct appropriation. So the intent, the money has to be spent on the overall intent of designing, preparing to build the bridge. If we do not build the bridge, we would have a conversation with the state on how to give the money back, or it doesn't get transferred for just general use in our budget.
Okay. And just for clarity, and the reason I'm asking that is I just want to make sure that by accepting this money, we're not obligated to build the bridge.
No.
And that if the remaining cost, which could be $50 million, that's not going to be local funds that are going to be allocated towards doing that. That's really the intent of the obligation. My question about obligation. I just want to make sure that if we accept this money, that it's only used for the bridge. If the bridge doesn't happen, there's no penalty. It goes back to the state.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm not. I'm not going to agree to fund this bridge using local funds. So this needs to be taken care of through state funding as well as funding from the federal government through infrastructure development, which they're doing through the RAISE grant. The city can't handle doing this type of a project with local funds. So to be clear where I am on this, we have spent some money. There's some discussion about spending money on the next item, which I'll ask some questions about there too. But I do want to echo what my colleague, Mr. Smith, just said about a public process. And so we need to make sure that as we go through this, that public process is nurtured, because I think you definitely have to have a lot of discussions about this. As I had said previously, I see a lot of benefit in this pedestrian bridge for the university and thereby the state. I see some benefit potentially for the city. And so the bulk of this needs to be taken care of by the state. I also see that there's some potential to make this a really good project where we can connect greenways to a pedestrian bridge and gain access, just like my colleague, Mr. Smith said, to South Knoxville from other greenways across the river in a more convenient way. I think those are good things too, But placement of the bridge, I think, is very important. I think, and just going through that public process is critical. So those were my questions and comments, and I appreciate your responses.
Thank you. Council Member Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. I continue to not support this project, and I've still only heard from one resident in our city who supports it that I've spoken with. Everyone else I've spoken with is not in support of the project. And it feels like a missed opportunity, especially when we have so many urgent needs in our city, to not redirect the funding to those transportation or road projects that we have reached more agreement on as a city and that have multiple benefits to us as a city, as city residents, and not, primarily to the University of Tennessee. We've gone through multiple attempts to raise the federal funds for this project unsuccessfully. And we are somehow celebrating that we can waste more taxpayer dollars towards this bridge. And those are state tax dollars, not local tax dollars, so it's okay to waste it. And then send the money back without that benefiting our city, and that's a good thing. I think there's a better way forward. These dollars came forth because the city advocated for the state to send those dollars. And just as it advocated for the state to send those dollars for a pedestrian bridge project, the city could also advocate for those dollars to be reallocated to a project in our city of a higher priority that has been vetted more recently than 2006, and that has more urgency in our city. So I would hate to see $20 million, even if it's state tax dollars and not local dollars, just wasted and thrown around until we have to send it back, when we could actually use those dollars on a project we could move forward today.
Just point of information, we've applied for federal dollars exactly one time. Is that right, Ms. Justice? And we came really close to getting it. And the main reason we didn't get it, according to the reviewers, was we didn't have any commitment from the state yet. When we reapply in January, we're going to be able to say we have a $20 million commitment from the state. I also disagree that this is a waste. I think this is reflective of a lot of community input over the years, and what Councilmember Smith and Vice Mayor Roberto have said rings true. We need to continue to get that input and listen, and not just base it on what happened 15 years ago, but to have those conversations ongoing. I'm pretty confident that the state of Tennessee appropriated this money specifically for this particular project, and if we indicate that we're not going to use it for that, they will reallocate it, but not to the city of Knoxville. They'll put it to some other thing, who knows what. But I don't think they'll be very open to suggestions of putting it to other very high needs uses. But this is something that they decided to fund the first time we asked. So I do think that is something not to take lightly. Councilmember Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Justice, I've got a few questions. What are we thinking the total cost of the bridge is at this point? I'm sure it will go up, but at this point. Well, at this point, it is $70 million. Okay. So we've got a plan forward with 20.
Yes.
And then we're hoping to get 25 more.
Yes.
And we're spending part of that 20 million allocation from the state before we even apply for the 25 million. So we may end up having to return to the state 19 million. You had said that there were a couple different groups, planning, public input, that we were going to be spending some of the money on.
Yes.
So we'll be going ahead and spending that before we even know if we're going to get the next amount of money.
Yes.
Okay. What is the plan for the rest of the piece. What is that, 25
Sure.
at this point? $25 million.
Sure. In the next item, there is a contract with CDM Smith to do a design refinement of our current set of plans that does have a $70 million estimate to look at how the materials, the design, the engineering can be revisited and adjusted to be more efficient, to be with our budget. So we're hoping to pull that $70 million down. It was a very beautiful and robust design when we started out, and we still want to have a unique bridge, but we want to find a better value with our dollar. So that's why we're asking CDM Smith to help us refine the cost and pull our costs down, hopefully to somewhere around 55 million, so we have a better structure with our funding.
I have seen no project cost less over time. Everything goes up.
Well, and we are doing a redesign of this bridge. So the intent is the same, but Tom could probably speak more eloquently about how bridges are designed and built, but there are different mechanisms and ways for the structural soundness to span the river.
Okay.
And so,
Thank
so
you.
that
So there's a way to
yes,
reduce
there's a
the
way.
cost.
Yes.
But we still haven't figured out. Now we're thinking if we're able to bring it down to 55 million, then we don't need any more money.
True.
Okay. To me, this feels like we are furnishing a house that we have no idea how we're going to pay for. The other piece is, what is the distance between this proposed waste of tax funder money and the Henley Street Bridge that already exists? What is the distance?
The distance between the landings or on the river.
Right.
Tom, do you know the exact distance? Approximate, I would say maybe half a mile.
Maybe quarter mile, half a mile?
It's less than a mile.
So if someone's a walker, there is a way they can walk.
That's true.
For a quarter mile, for a half mile, that's a lot of money. If someone wants to walk, there is a way for them to walk. There are two bridges that already have sidewalks. Thank you.
I do want to say that part of our RAISE grant application and some of the viability for this application from the RAISE grant was about safety. Henley is, and those connections for pedestrians are difficult for pedestrians. And so it is close, but this would be a strictly pedestrian amenity. I would also say that if we, again, the second item is all about looking at a design of a bridge that's more affordable. And we'll say this, if we go in and we can't get a design that's affordable, we'll come back to council and say, hey, we don't think we can do this bridge. We believe we can get this bridge down to about $55 million, and that's what this next item is.
So
The
just
design-
one last piece
Yeah.
before my minute is up, okay? Is that you're talking about the safety. I've walked across the Henley Street Bridge many, many times when I was younger. Now I have a car. But I've walked across it. There are a lot of very dangerous sidewalks. That's not one of the most, there are a lot of places in Knoxville that already are very dangerous for pedestrians. I would rather spend the money on sidewalks where they're needed that are dangerous than this thing that's a quarter mile away from an existing sidewalk. That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Fugit?
Thank you, Mayor. I hear all my colleagues' concerns. I think the reality is this $20 million is offered to us to help pay for a bridge. The state wants a bridge. It's been talked about before. I do think there is value in a pedestrian bridge and a bicycle bridge. Other communities have them. It is a safer way to travel. Walking across even the Gay Street Bridge as an individual is a little scary with cars so close, but be that as may. The reality is if we don't vote for this, if we don't accept this $20 million, it's not going, we can't ask for $20 million to do something else. This is what the state wants to do with it. So I think the reality is, do we give this a chance? Take some of that $20 million and pay for the design upgrade, then see what the difference is. If the University of Tennessee wants this, which is also one of the major employers and economic drivers in this city that generates lots of sales tax revenue off of all the things that happen around the university, then maybe they will help bring it over the top. But we can't speak to that until we have some real hard numbers and we apply for a federal grant. If we don't get it, we don't get it. But if we don't accept this $20 million, this is a missed opportunity. So I plan to support it.
Thank you. Council Member Parker.
Thank you, Mayor. A few points. It was mentioned other cities have pedestrian bridges. What I've seen largely in other cities, though, are bridges be repurposed to be turned into pedestrian bridges, and that's similar to the conversation we've been having in Knoxville about James White Parkway. I think that's a great idea. The linear park, we don't have that much traffic on that bridge. It would link right into the Neyland Greenway, go straight over to UT campus. I have no idea what we're talking about building a brand new bridge when we can just refurbish James White Parkway. It makes no sense to me. So no, I'm not in support of this bridge at all. One thing I wanted to ask is if we could clarify, I thought we did go after a raised grant in 2011.
Ms. Parker, yes, you're correct. I was wrong. We have applied for money for this bridge 2 times, 2011 and this
Tiger.
last year.
Thank
So
you.
Tiger,
Okay.
yeah.
So I just want to reiterate, I really think we have other options that are better, and I believe we have brilliant people in the mayor's office who can make that argument to the state and shift those dollars over to a project that we can put them to use immediately.
Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to add a little bit more context. I think, where to begin? I think there's a reason that the East Tennessee Design Center exists, for example. A lot of times you have to have a design before you can go raise more money or sell an idea or get additional funding. So the analogy around building a house, I think, is a good one. This community nonprofits rely on East Tennessee Design Center in a very similar fashion. You have to have a vision and have to be able to show that vision and design it. Another is this is not just for UT students. I want to do some suggestion so that everybody go read the vision plan, the South Knoxville vision plan. It's a South Knoxville idea that connects to the rest of the city, including campus. And building this bridge would bring a lot of assets, including public parks, to the Vestal neighborhood and the South Waterfront neighborhood, none of which have received new sidewalks, parks, greenways, aside from Fort Dickerson, which is a big investment, but none of the connections exist. Furthermore, if you're on Scottish Pike and need to walk to campus or any part of the city, central or west, the idea of walking to James White Parkway east, about 1.5 miles to turn around and come another 1.5 miles west for a full 4-mile loop is not realistic. And I think everybody here that has a vision for a certain thing appreciates the initial stages being fluid. I also want to point out that I think Mr. Brace described, and I've been highly cautious of understanding, is how this is funded. There will be parks built in the next 3 years, small parks in different parts of this city that will cost more than what Mr. Brace just outlined. Those numbers will change, can change, and that's part of this body to scrutinize those changes as those come along. I also want to highlight that, I may have already said this, but for those members of this body that support Vision Zero, the number of people that will use this bridge will not just be students passing back and forth. It will be residents across South Knoxville. I also want to highlight the vision plan that started. And this is why it's really important, I think, for people to think about a vision plan. Not every piece will happen. Not every piece will happen at different stages, and I've had to learn this. I've also had to learn that when you start plucking away different pieces, it becomes less a vision and more of a Frankenstein. And this is part of the vision for the west side of Chapman Highway and is integral to everything else. So if you look at the vision plan, the documents, and read, I think one of the speakers earlier provided a narrative that sounds exactly what's on the east side of Chapman Highway. And when I talk to those residents every month at the neighborhood meetings and I speak to them, there's more than one that raised their voice. And they all want to make sure that it lands well and that their area gets the same investment that they see enjoy on Sevier Avenue, for example. The kayaking, the walking, the coffee shops, the sitting and dwelling in parks. The people on the west side of Chapman Highway want that the exact same way the east side of Chapman Highway. And I would beg to differ with anybody who's not at those meetings. So the people that I think we need to listen to most are the people that listen or that live nearby. And the reason I bring that up is because I remember a lot of discussions around the baseball stadium having a very similar tone, where we were talking about the people who live nearest and what they want instead of listening to them. And sometimes if you were to listen to them, you might hear that what they wanted was investment in their community and that part of town, much like other parts of town. And as a reminder, while we're on baseball, if we wouldn't have had a multi-use stadium, what would be there would be private condos that would not be affordable and not be accessible by anybody in the community that needs missing middle housing. So I just want to remind folks that the most important thing you can do when you have a vision and investing in a dramatic way like this is to make sure that the people who live there get new assets and amenities that they can access. That is the number one thing I've heard from people in South Knoxville. The second is do whatever possible to mitigate whatever unintended consequences could happen when you bring something so significant there. So I just want to make sure for everybody out there watching or here tonight that when you listen to the people who are in South Knoxville who are talking about this on a daily basis. It's hard to have a 24/7 public forum for everybody to hear. I encourage you to come to some of those conversations with me. If you want to hear from the people who live nearby there, contact me and come to a meeting and you can hear what's important to them.
Thank you, Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, like everything that comes before us, I try to analyze it as cost benefit, how much money we spend and what we get for it. As of right now, we really don't know how much the city's contribution is going to be on a possible bridge. I don't see any problem, though, with asking for money that with little strings attached, whether it be the states or the feds. If the bridge isn't built, we can have discussions with the state about diverting that money. I have no way of knowing how those will come out. But the bottom line for me is I'm going to wait and see how much money that we can pull in and then see how much money UT will contribute or the county, and then what it will take for the taxpayers in Knoxville to complete what we lack for this bridge. And that's when I'll make my final decision on it. Although the bridge, it would be an amenity for sure. The thing that I'm most interested in as kind of a periphery thing to the bridge, and I've had discussions with Mr. Brace, is actually possible, the way it would possibly spur improvements on the highway, on Chapman Highway, and how we could possibly start thinking in terms of building housing along the corridors. And if we can use this development there in that area and bring in Chapman Highway as part of a bigger plan and really get serious about putting housing on corridors where the infrastructure is already there and where there's a significant amount of space, instead of trying to shoehorn it here and there into neighborhoods, but taking this significant amount of blighted space along the corridors, including Chapman Highway. So those are the discussions as we evaluate the bridge. I'm looking at ancillary benefits, possible ancillary benefits. So, but as far as asking the state for $20 million, I don't have any problem doing that. There's no strings attached. Maybe we can keep it and maybe we don't. Anyway, that's just a clarification, I suppose, of where I am right at this moment.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 7-2. Okay, next item, please.
11G is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with CDM Smith Incorporated to provide preliminary engineering design services for the South Waterfront pedestrian and bicycle bridge project for an amount not to exceed $475,000.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. We have one person signed up to speak against this, Ms. Tina Sparks. If you come to the podium, state, we already have your name and address, but come to the podium, you have up to 5 minutes.
Tina Sparks, 37917, formerly 379 Tommy Smith. I lived in South Knoxville, I imagine before you were born, or pretty close to it. And for 38 years of that time, I lived in Vestal. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on in Vestal. And I understand that. And I used to have a thing about South Knoxville. And some of y'all may have heard me say this. I know some of my friends have heard me say this. There's South Knoxville, and then there's the real South Knoxville. And I was so proud to live in the real South Knoxville, Vestal. 38 years I lived there. Before that, I lived on Chapman Highway in married student housing, Toledo Court. So I know about South Knoxville. Unfortunately, I don't live there anymore. I think we need to be very careful when we start talking, Councilperson Charlie Thomas, about blighted spaces along Chapman Highway. That sounds awful familiar to me. Blighted spaces in East Knoxville. We're talking about I forget which one of you said it, but talking about that this bridge is not going to just benefit UT, and that maybe we can get money from UT for it, and thereby go ahead with it. And this, I am glad to see. I did look a little bit at who is CDM Smith. They've been around for a minute. They've been around since 1947, and they're from here. At least they're not from Portland, Oregon. Cat re-envisioned. So that's a good thing. And maybe they will have a lot of really good, positive things to tell you all once they get to looking at it. Again, I'm going to quote from former Mayor Bill Haslam. I guess I call him Dr. Haslam now. He's a professor over at UT now, right? Or will be soon. He said that not everything, and I think Councilperson Smith said this as well, not everything would be built exactly as shown in the plan. So we have to be flexible. But we must also be realistic, and it has to be affordable. This is not affordable. This is not affordable. I'm going to read one more thing, and then I'm going to sit down because y'all aren't listening to me anyway, so it's okay. But I'm going to read it anyway. This is from Randy Boyd. The public-private partnership opportunity will enhance the look and the atmosphere of Neyland Stadium and the Knoxville campus while creating an additional destination for the city of Knoxville, all without state funding. All without state funding. Hear those words. Am I missing something? Y'all just got to know that what you're doing is not right. You know it's not. We know that you know it's not. How hard is it for y'all to do the right thing just because it's the right thing? Talking about, well, what if we spend this much money and then the bridge doesn't happen? We spend $475,000 to CDM Smith Inc. On top of that. You're going to spend $19 million. Well, then you only got $1 million to give back to the state. This doesn't make any sense to me. I know I'm just a kindergarten teacher, an old lady from South Knoxville, but this does not make sense to me, people. Y'all need to get your act together. This is us. This is me. This is
you, Ms.
them.
Sparks.
We shouldn't be intimidated by you all or feel like we have to come up here and explain why we're mad as hell.
Ms. Sparks, that's your 5 minutes.
That's my 5 minutes. Thank you. And thank you, Lauren, for looking at me. Thank you, Tommy Smith, for listening to me. Thank you, Amelia Parker, for all you do.
Council
Seema,
members, that
thank you.
concludes people who signed up to speak on this agenda item. Any questions or comments? Vice Mayor Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move this over to Chief of Development, Rebecca Jane Justice. So in this project now, we're discussing engineering assistance to maybe look at a redesign for a pedestrian bridge, looking at whether or not there's some, cost differential from the original proposal of around $70 million bridge, which was done quite some time ago. Is that basically what we're talking about with this money?
Yes.
Ms. Justice?
Yes.
Okay. And just where is the money that's being proposed here coming from? I remember there was a bridge fund that was put together a long time ago dealing with this bridge when it was first introduced. Is this money being drawn from that old account, or is this money being drawn from something we're dealing with currently?
It's being drawn from the old account.
Okay. And I think the only thing I would just reiterate again is that, I do see there is some potential for benefit for the city. I see a lot of potential for other parties. I'm not going to commit, city funds to dealing with this. It needs to be funded by these other partners because the city can't afford to do this kind of a project at all on our own. And I do applaud the efforts of trying to find maybe a design that's less expensive to accomplish a good goal. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries 7-2. Next item, please.
11H is a resolution modifying certain procedural practices regarding the Mayor's Council on Disability Issues.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11I is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the Volunteer Ministry Center Incorporated to provide an amount not to exceed $50,000 in homeless general funds for enhanced street outreach services through the continued operation of a mobile shower trailer to service individuals experiencing homelessness in Knoxville.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Council members, there's 2 people signed up to speak in favor of this, Ms. Sparks and Mr. Roach. If you could come to the podium. Unless, if you wish, you signed up to speak to these items, this item.
So this here's what I'm talking about. How money could be better spent. Here, after all this that we just went through, and we'll still be going through, and that we're still going through with the baseball stadium and East Knoxville and all the other. But here's $50,000 in the homeless general fund to enhance street outreach services. Now, this was, let's see. Okay. I'm reading from the resolution, okay. The Department of Housing and Urban Development accepted the city's 2020-2024 consolidated plan that included extensive community engagement to reduce and prevent homelessness, yada, yada, stabilize, right, revitalize neighborhoods, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so we got, on this over here, we're going to spend $70 million on a bridge. And over here, we got people that need a shower. And I don't even know that this money is actually going to go, the money's going to go to, for the, what was it? It's going to go to the people who work at VMC, and I have nothing against VMC. They do a lot of good work there. There are a lot of dedicated people at volunteer ministries. It says here that VMC is an amount not to exceed $50,000 for a mobile shower trailer program for 300 eligible participants. See, here's the thing. We're going to spend $70 million, all told, to be able to walk across that river. And 300 people will get to be clean for a day or two with this money here. Do y'all see that there's something not quite right here? Now, I applaud this. I really do. I really, really do. We should have done, we should still be doing. On our way here tonight, we come right down Broadway and we see a lot of the folks that may or may not take advantage of this shower. We saw some people that we see every single day. I work downtown, and purposely, Rick Roach and I drive Broadway. We drive Broadway 4, 5, 6 times a week. And we see the same faces over and over, and sometimes we don't see those faces anymore. Today, there was a first responder, there was a fire truck, and there was a KPD vehicle. And there was a man that we both recognized, and we looked at him and we said, he's still here. Coming down Broadway is a real eye-opener. Just think what $20 million would do down on Broadway. Just think of how many people could have a shower, could sit down and read a book in a cool place. How many people could get the help that they needed with their substance abuse problems. $20 million could be spent a lot of better ways than what y'all are doing. And, you know, it says COVID highlighted the necessity to enhance and expand the delivery of engagement services. No, we didn't need COVID. If we needed COVID to tell us to do the right thing, no. We should have been doing it all along, and we still should be doing it. COVID, no COVID. No. I'm finished.
Mr. Roach? You'll have up to 5 minutes.
Rick Roach, Knoxville. Everything she said, a little bit more. Yeah, come through there a lot. But here's the deal. I'm going to say it again, what she said. $50,000 to keep your body clean, to refresh you. You all take it for granted. $20 million to walk across and bike across a river. Priority, commitment. We want to talk about, safety of walking across the Henley Bridge or the Gay Street Bridge. No comparison. As that is a reason why you would want to build a bridge just directly to the UT campus. Basically what it would do, let's be honest, all that bridge would do would be to make it easier to go see the Volunteers. Go Big Orange. And I'm the biggest UT sports fan. Okay? But I don't need it if I'm coming from South Knoxville. Okay? Let's be honest. There's a problem with commitment. You $20 million, I'm going to repeat, $20 million. Just think what that would do. Instead, you got people like Ms. Sparks, myself, others. We have to stand up here and talk to you guys and act like fools just to get you to consider doing a common sense thing and putting it in its proper place in terms of priorities for the people, the city of Knoxville. And y'all scrambling, sitting up here trying to explain what you will and will not do and what you can and cannot do with the excess money that you're going to spend of state money. Mobile, $50,000 ain't going to cover nothing if you're paying attention to where the homeless are. Guess what? They're in all parts of Knoxville. All parts. You're going to go hunt them down, say, come on, let's take a shower today, get cleaned up? I doubt it. We can do better. We can do better. I'm telling you right now, I might go over just to save on the water bill. If you're going to go and have a mobile station set up in East Knoxville somewhere, I might just go over there and take advantage, even though I'm not homeless. I'll save on the water bill. But we're in bad shape right now. We're in bad shape right now in the city of Knoxville. And it's like right now, there are other things that we should be paying attention to and prioritizing. I'm for this. But it's nothing compared to arguing about what we're going to do with $20 million of state funds. Nothing. And you all can't make a commitment to take care of the least of these. Man.
Council, that concludes people who signed up to speak to this item. Any other questions or comments?
Is there anyone here from?
Is anyone here from Volunteer Ministry Center?
Okay.
Okay, this is not a new thing. We've been funding this for several years. So I guess, okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11J is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an agreement with the East Tennessee Foundation for the administration, operation, and management of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund in an amount not to exceed $200,000.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11K is a resolution authorizing the mayor to execute an amendment to the agreement between the City of Knoxville and Sports Service Pros LLC for additional tennis court maintenance services at Inskip Park and Tyson Park, Kyle C. Testerman Tennis Courts, to increase the contract price by $31,105 for a new contract total price of $240,105.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none? Council, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
11L is a resolution authorizing the mayor to contract with off-duty management to provide scheduling of police officers for off-duty employment at no cost to the city.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Councilmember Parker? Oh, I'm sorry, we have a speaker. Okay.
It's me.
Mr. Roach?
Rick Roach, Knoxville. Chief, can you explain the need for this? I know it's no cost. Are we having a problem? There's a lot of extra duty. There's not enough extra duty, overtime to pay, so that they have to go get a part-time job somewhere, security or whatever. I know I see a lot of police presence in East Knoxville in particular, and Northeast Knoxville. Can you speak to that as to why this is needed, why you need to have at no cost off-duty management to provide scheduling of police officers for off-duty employment at no cost?
Council members, that concludes people signed up to speak to this. Councilmember Parker and then Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor. My comments might speak to some of the questions Mr. Roach raised, but then I'll ask the chief to fill in some of those details. But I'm in favor of this measure, and the reason I'm in favor of it is because we currently have, according to our packet, we currently have an officer assigned to carry out these responsibilities. But that would shift these responsibilities over to this scheduling company, and then the cost would be built in. So if the current rate is $50 an hour, the rate would then go up to $55 an hour, and that $5 would go towards paying for this service. So it seems like a good idea to me. I think I can't speak to the policy pieces too much, but I do remember when this became an issue in our city, and I do believe a policy was adopted requiring KPD officers to go through the department to be assigned to these not after hours, but
Secondary.
Yeah, to these secondary positions. So it's a policy of the city that these off-duty hours are scheduled within the department. And now this would be handled by a third-party consultant.
Chief Noel?
Yes, ma'am. So what you're speaking of is previously, years ago, the officers were basically free agents. They could negotiate directly with individual businesses. They were employees of those businesses. They were paid directly by these businesses. In 2015, this policy was put into place. It went in, a lot of ways resolved some of the issues. This goes further. This puts the Knoxville Police Department in line with national best practices. So instead of having a police employee managing these off-duty jobs, and right now the officers are still paid directly by the businesses, and we have no way of really tracking all of that, everything now has to go through this company. So if you work a off-duty job, some secondary employment, everything has to go through this process. You are paid through this company. The company provides $15 million of liability insurance and workers' compensation as well. It's kind of a gray area right now. And really, again, this is just something, this is a national best practice. It gets an individual police officer out of the scheduling business, and it puts it in a fair and transparent way through this company.
Thank you. Councilmember Fugit and then Singh.
Thank you. Chief Noel, I assume this also applies. Oftentimes, organizations ask for a police officer to be at something. Schools do an after-school program. This would be the same process. They would go through this organization. So it's not just, correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that I've had to do that in the past. And so it's not just secondary employment with full-time employers. It could be for special events that citizens or organizations ask for an off-duty police officer to be there, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. So anyone that's hiring a police officer for what we call secondary employment, being paid not by the Knoxville Police Department, but paid by a third party, every one of those jobs will have to go through this procedure.
Thank you. Councilmember Singh?
Thank you, Mayor. This is a little bit different. The hours that patrol were working, the 12-hour shifts, is that something that's still going on, and just still concerned about how rough that's been?
Yes, ma'am, they are still working 12-hour shifts.
Do they get to choose if that's something they want to do, or that's just mandatory?
Officers who work in our districts on patrol shifts, that's the shifts that we're working right now. Now, they work 12 hours. They work basically 4 days 1 week and 3 days the next week. So they have a lot of time off built around that. Basically, it averages out still to about a 40-hour work week. They work 60 hours 1 week, and the other week they're working about 24.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Council, if it's okay, I think we should take a brief break and recess until 8:30. Okay, it's 8:30. I'd like to reconvene this meeting. Okay, will you read item 12A, please?
12A is an ordinance appropriating the sum of $1,500 from the Parks and Recreation Department funds and donating same toward the sponsorship of Legacy Parks Foundation's 2023 Legacy Luncheon for the Parks.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those, Councilmember McKenzie. No.
Didn't mean to push that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. Seeing no further questions or comments, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12B is an ordinance to amend the Knoxville City Code. To amend the Knoxville City Code Appendix B Zoning Code, Article 10.3.B, Accessory Dwelling Unit, removing or amending standards for ADUs as outlined in Exhibit A, including modification of dimensional standards, R. Bentley Marlowe, applicant all districts.
Move to approve.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Council members, there's two people signed up to speak on this. The first is Larry Silverstein, signed up to speak against this, and Mr. Givens is signed up to speak in favor. Oh, this is not. Do I have? Okay, so I'm sorry, Mr. Givens, who speaks in favor, goes first. Sorry, Mr. Silverstein. You'll be up in just a minute. Is Mr. Givens here?
Always. If you're not having fun, you ain't doing it right. Maybe UT could get a sponsor for the bridge, so one day you can walk across the Walmart pedestrian bridge to the Food City Arena at the Neyland Entertainment Complex by Boyd Sports at the University of Tennessee. My name is Tyler Givens. I live in Knoxville. I support the ordinance in front of us with one simple amendment: leave the owner-occupied requirement. So that would be strike both instances of line 1 in the preamble, so eliminate the requirement for owner to occupy, blah, blah, blah. Delete that. And then in section 10.3.2 of the attached exhibit, leave the existing text of the code unchanged. So leave the owner-occupied requirement in and accept all of the other amendments. I strongly support the proposed adjustments to make it easier to build ADUs on smaller lots and to also allow slightly larger ADUs. Anything that lets homeowners expand the number of bedrooms available as more and more people are facing rent increases and evictions. A friend or a family member with extra space can be a lifesaver. An ADU renter can help folks on fixed incomes keep up with tax increases and maintenance costs. The administration's plan wants to limit even modest multiplexes to an approval process and has already identified areas where it will allow such use. In the Inskip and Fountain City areas, the old Virginia College location would actually be a fantastic place to develop a mid-rise apartment complex. It's close to a park, it's within walking distance of a full-service grocery store, and missing middle housing is probably a good option for some of the Inskip infill, but again, we need to focus on some more density, more than what missing middle has to offer in the places where it is available. The other locations identified by the plan are the Magnolia Avenue corridor from North Broadway east to Rutledge Pike and Alice Bell, and the East Knoxville and Morningside areas. None of these areas have convenient grocery stores, which is sort of odd. There are a lot of food marts along Magnolia, but I'm not sure that any of them have fresh produce. There was supposed to be a grocery store at Austin Homes. Another off-sided concern in these projects is traffic. People are coming and people are traffic. Fighting against density isn't going to reduce congestion. It's better to have density spread around the whole city rather than stuffed into a select area. The solution to traffic problems is more density and more people able to live close to where they work. It's better for more folks to spend a couple minutes on a surface road than to spend hours clogging up arterials. Increased downtown neighborhood density will likely increase the ridership of our new electric buses as well. Some other arguments we may hear tonight are harder to politely address, so I'll try to be clear with this statement. I would not say that all people talking about preserving neighborhood qualities and character are racists, but I will say that racists like to talk about preserving neighborhood qualities and character. Frankly, I don't like the idea that my neighbor down the street can say whether or not I build an ADU for my ailing mother on my property. If folks want to control neighborhood character, they can form an HOA, and I'll try to get on the board and dissolve it. The government has no business picking which private citizens can build code-compliant structures on their property. Special use permitting is overly complicated and ripe for abuse to begin with. This is the smallest increment of density that we could possibly apply citywide. So let's support the necessary density increase in an equitable and just way, but keep the owner-occupied requirement. Thank you.
Mr. Silverstein. If you could state your name and address for the record, you'll have up to 5 minutes.
My name's Larry Silverstein, 7808 Sheffield Drive, 37909. I'm speaking on behalf of Community Forum. I will not repeat my comments made earlier about items 10A, B, and C. But regarding item 12B, which deals with ADUs, Community Forum requests that you send back item 12B to Knox Planning Commission. The applicant's proposed zoning ordinance amendment keeps changing. The latest proposal, as I understand it, is much different from what Planning Commission approved on August the 10th. It now includes maintaining it in its entirety the present zoning ordinance requirement of owner occupancy of either the ADU or the primary dwelling. The applicant needs to decide what his proposed zoning ordinance amendment will be, and then the Planning Commission staff should review it and make a recommendation to the Planning Commission, which will then vote on it. In other words, I think we need to start over on this item. It's just gone back and forth and changing hourly, it seems like. The city administration and the Planning Commission staff recommended that the public process initiated by the city administration regarding missing middle housing was the proper way to deal with all related issues. The Planning Commission did not follow that recommendation, and after some discussion decided to modify the original proposed zoning amendment by removing 3 sections. City Council received a letter from Community Forum dated September 3rd, in which we requested that City Council deny or at the very least postpone Agenda Item 12B. In our letter, we specifically addressed the negative impact of removing the owner occupation requirement for either the ADU or the principal dwelling. There are still significant issues regarding the proposed amendment, both as modified by the Planning Commission and what is now being proposed by the applicant. The planning staff recommendation on August the 2nd pointed out several issues in the staff analysis. The City of Knoxville Plans Review and Inspections Division also noted problematic issues with the proposed amendment. These included issues regarding the minimum size of lots, a limit on maximum gross floor area, rear lot setbacks, and maximum height of the ADU. Some of these issues remain even after the Planning Commission's August 10th decision. Zoning amendments need to be carefully considered by the public and by the Planning Commission. Article 10.3B received a lot of attention and debate during the recode process. The proposed language changed several times before being approved in 2019 to go into effect in January 2020. Drafting modifications to a zoning ordinance amendment on the fly during a Planning Commission meeting without public input is not the proper way of dealing with important zoning amendments. It just isn't. So we urge you to vote to send back this item to Knox Planning Commission, let the public process for missing middle housing take place, rather than to rush to approve a zoning amendment without adequate public discussion and input. I thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Council members, that concludes the people who signed up to speak to this item. Vice Mayor Roberto.
Thank you, Mayor. The owner occupancy requirement that went into the accessory dwelling unit piece went through an extensive series of changes during the recode process that I know several of us remember. That was debated very thoroughly in a public process where there was notice to folks, and we had a lot of public participation throughout that process. One of the things identified in that debate was unintended consequences that could occur from not having owner occupancy for the accessory dwelling units. I'm also interested in hearing from staff on this particular issue because staff didn't really get a chance to review this. It was done on the fly, and I've seen multiple amendments coming through here in the last few days about what this is going to look like. So my recommendation would be to send this back to planning to review, and in that review, my message to planning staff and to the commissioners is that council has thoroughly reviewed and debated this issue about owner occupancy, and that really should not be touched without some very serious consideration of the unintended consequence of doing so. So I'll make a motion that we send this back to planning for that review.
Second.
Okay, motion made to send this back. Okay, remand this back to Planning Commission has been made by Vice Mayor Roberto, seconded by Councilmember Thomas. All right, I'm not sure whose light was on next. Councilmember Singh, and then Ryder, and then Testerman. So.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to ask Peter Ahrens to come. I think he's got some good information on this.
Aren't we supposed to only be speaking to the motion that's on the floor? I just want to ask.
Oh, well, the motion is to remand.
I'm wondering about your opinion if we should send it back right now or not.
Hi, Peter Ahrens, Plans Review and Building Inspections. That's totally up to you.
What else you got?
I can speak to how these proposals impact enforcement, if that's what you want to hear about.
That sounds
Okay. I won't dive into the owner occupancy. That's up to you guys. I can tell you that that is difficult to enforce after the initial ADU is constructed. We do that now, and I think we do a very good job of it. We don't regulate the sale of homes. We don't track where ADUs are located. So at best, it would be complaint driven, but that's for everybody else to decide. The minimum lot area doesn't impact enforcement a whole lot. I can tell you that the change of the rear setback from 10 feet to 5 feet makes sense operationally because Section 10.3A talks about accessory structures. We'll call it a garage. So somebody can have a garage that's 5 foot off the setback, but if they convert that garage into an ADU, now they've got a variance that's required. And we've seen many of those go through BZA where people have an existing structure that's too close to the property line. It meets for a garage, but it doesn't for an ADU. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Maximum gross floor area. It's also confusing for our customers. The maximum gross floor area and the percentage of the primary dwelling. I was talking with others earlier today. I had a customer call me up. They've got a 7,500 square foot lot. They want to build a 1,750 square foot house. They said, how tall can the ADU be? We talked about that, and then they said, well, how big can it be? If you go to 10.3A, the maximum gross area for an accessory structure is 750 square feet. But then you go to an ADU, and it says you can have 800 square feet of gross floor area. But then if you go to 10.3B9, based on the size of the house, it can only be 700 square feet. So there's a lot of variables. I would love the opportunity to clean that up and regulate it in one manner. Other than that, the last item of changing the maximum height, I don't like creating another level of inconsistency between a garage and an ADU. So I hope that answers
Okay, thank you.
your questions.
One of the reasons I wanted to hear from you is speaking to the sending it back. I wonder if we can talk about making an amendment to it that we feel comfortable with at this time. Perhaps just limiting these to the TDR area, something like that. Just a suggestion, instead of just sending it back right away.
Councilmember Ryder.
Okay, so I'm going to try and stick to the track of commenting on sending it back. I will say I agree with the comments from Vice Mayor Roberto, and I would like to comment on what Councilwoman Singh just asked if we make amendments. Even if we make amendments, they still have to be vetted through the Planning Commission because they weren't vetted then at that time, so they would have to go back anyway. I think the way to address what you just brought up is potentially package it in the motion to send it back, to say send it back to the Planning Commission for review, for staff review, and include X or Y or Z or all three. Okay, that's my thoughts, but I'm not an attorney, so we'll defer to our attorneys on that, and if that's the will of the body here. I do want to ask Ms. Brooks a question while we're talking about sending it back. I think this is a little bit of an unusual situation. In my time in Knoxville, I don't think I've ever seen anything edited in this fashion by the commissioners and not vetted through the staff or based on a staff recommendation. I mean, have you seen that before? I cannot recall that per se.
No, I can't recall during my time that we've had that come forward in that manner.
Okay. For the reasons that Mr. Ahrens has stated in the various factors, there's very complex things about, the setbacks and the recommendations for middle housing that the city published. I know that staff from planning, staff from the building department, like Mr. Barry, Mr. Aarons, the engineering department, have all been weighing in on the various changes. And not only does this need more public review, it also needs staff review to make sure that there's consistency in the code on things like heights and percentages and setbacks and how it interacts with the code about garages. I know I have neighbors that have had to get a variance for a garage and a variance for an ADU to build a brand new garage with an ADU in it. And those are things that I have been talking with staff, and I know that staff has looked at from the variance side to be corrected in the code. So we would be serving everyone best by sending this back and having a full review of everything. And since we're only supposed to be talking about the motion to send it back, I will stop myself on that note.
Okay, Councilmember Testerman.
Mr. Aarons, sorry. So I too agree with sending this back, and you may have just answered my question when you spoke. So there is no tracking of the number of ADUs that it currently exists within the city?
That is correct.
Even through the permitting process, there's not a way
It would be a standard accessory structure or an alteration.
All right, just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Councilmember Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. What, other than amendments we make, what value is there, I guess, Ms. Brooks, what value is there sending this back to planning?
I'm not sure that I can answer that, Councilmember. I would defer to you all in terms of.
If we don't make any amendments to it, you all have already considered this.
The Planning Commission has considered this, yes, that they're.
I may be missing something here.
I think the Planning Commission considered this, but it hadn't been reviewed or get recommendation by staff. Is that accurate?
Planning Commission did have a fairly robust discussion about this particular item. And there was a planning commissioner who introduced amendments to Mr. Marlowe's proposal, and those were discussed as well. And then they took action on the item.
Mr. Frost.
Thank you, Mayor. But was it the planning staff? Did the planning staff, different from the planning commissioners, consider the proposed amendments? They study it and make a recommendation, I think is what.
The amendment that was introduced during the meeting, is that the
Yes.
question? No, that was the first time that the staff had, we did not review that in advance. No, it was presented during the meeting.
Councilmember Smith, do you have further
There's
questions?
maybe one follow-up while I have the mic. Mr. Aarons, could you come back up again, get your steps in? Did I hear you say you don't keep a list of ADUs?
We do not.
Okay, but you have to permit them.
We do permit them.
Okay.
We don't separate them from, if an accessory structure is an accessory structure.
Right,
Whether it's a
but-
garage or an ADU. So
Understood,
we
but
don't
you have a
get that
list
granular.
of permitted ADUs.
We do not. They're lumped in with garages. They're
Okay.
lumped in with storage sheds that
Okay.
are large enough.
All right, thank you.
Vice Mayor Roberto? Oh, no, yeah, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Ryder.
Thank you, Mayor. I fundamentally disagree with the notion that owner occupancy is difficult to enforce. I think you just identified one of the problems, which is if you're not looking at something, then how are you going to know whether you're enforcing it or not? Council had an extensive workshop on other issues where we talked about enforcement, and we identified for staff how to take care of that, and those were implemented, and that's a good model for dealing with this. It is absolutely enforceable. Director Aarons brought up a very good point about why we need to send this back, which was he mentioned that he found areas that he felt like needed to get cleaned up. So I do think it needs to go back for that reason. I'm definitely open to listening to ideas about amendments. But my problem with what's going on in this particular proposal, as well as amendments on the fly right now, is that we haven't provided for a transparent process with public notice about what's going on with regards to this. And there are other areas that need to get cleaned up. So I think just in sending it back to planning so staff can make a recommendation on it and Mr. Ahrens can join in that discussion and talk to them, we may end up getting a product that's, better for us to review and can go through a public process that would be better. So my recommendation would be just to stick with the motion as is, send it back, and go from there. Thank you.
Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah, I'm not particularly interested at this moment in my life on sitting here writing legislate or the ordinance on the fly with Mr. Aaron's input tonight, per se. But I want to ask a procedural question. If we're making a motion to send it back to the Planning Commission, that is for the plans review or the plans are we making a motion for the Planning Commission to re-review what they wrote on the fly? How do we need to word the motion? So normally what would happen is the administration or Mr. Ahrens, when we've edited code, parts of recode, is Mr. Ahrens, Mr. Barry, they deal with the same thing 20 times and they're like, hey, here's a problem in the code that we've identified. We'd like to make an edit to it. They propose that edit. It's been vetted through them. They bring it to us. But this is like a reverse order. No offense, Mr. Marlowe. This is, we don't have a process for this. This being any citizen willing to pay the fee to be able to throw something out to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission write it on the fly and send it to us. It goes to the Planning Commission. They wrote it on the fly. We want the staff to review it, and I want Mr. Ahrens and Mr. Barry to lay eyes on it. And so by sending it back to the Planning Commission, I'm not sure that that's what's happening, even though I did second your motion, I think, or unless someone else did. I honestly don't remember at this point. I want us to get what we want out of this, because this is not the normal order of operations and procedure for this. So if maybe Mr. Swanson or Ms. Brooks or Mr. Frost could advise us how to get what we want, which is I want Mr. Ahrens and Mr. Barry to add to their work plan, which is to review this. I appreciate the commissioners, but I don't think that that's all that we need. Sorry, I'm tired and grumpy.
If I may,
Please.
I think if you simply make a motion to remand it to planning and it goes back to planning, that's why we have the executive director of planning here to help them understand why it got sent back. With this particular one, these are smart folks. Our planning staff are really smart folks. They'll know why it came back, and they'll understand that they want you to explore all the possible options available and make the planning staff then will make some recommendation of what they believe to be the best solution to the problem to planning, to the commissioners themselves, and then the commissioners will do whatever they do. And you could end up with amendments on the fly again, but I suspect probably not. So I think the motion to remand will accomplish what you want to accomplish, but I would ask Amy if she agrees with that or not.
Yes, I agree with that. And we'll work with plans review and inspection based on the discussion that you all have had this evening.
Thank you.
Councilmember Smith and then Thomas.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we just want to follow up on Councilman Ryder's comments. I think you highlighted a very important aspect of this, that it's kind of clumsy and it doesn't normally come to us this way. I also want to highlight that I know Mr. Marlowe has been raising this issue for some time, and it's no secret that ADUs haven't happened at the rate that we expected them to in the city. Does it mean we shed all public forum or all public input? I would say, I should have said at the out, there needs to be a lot more public input on this. However, the reason it's coming to us like this is because it hasn't been addressed, and there's been multiple voices of concern that this has been stymied. So We're here because this has not been picked up in an efficient manner. With that said, I'm fine with remanding it back to Planning Commission and letting our expert planners take a crack at this. Although I can't miss the opportunity while we're here and to provide some of my thoughts on this at the moment, which is removing the lot size minimum and reducing setbacks, I think are reasonable adjustments. I can't get on board with, at the moment, with removing owner-occupied requirement, but I think when you talk to enough community folks in the community, you may shape brains on that one. So I think that's a question mark for me, and I have serious concerns about the increase in scale of an ADU. But, that's you get what you paid for there. But I do think as we send it back, if any planning commissioners care about one perspective, that's mine for now. I want to make sure that we're not sending it back blindly with just please deal with this to planning commission. So I'm okay with remanding it as well, but I want to make sure this applicant receives response because this issue's been lingering for too long.
Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I agree with the remanding it back, and it has been some shifting sands here. I watched the Planning Commission meeting and saw the series of amendments, and then another one was suggested here, and we really need to vet this. This is not, I don't think, the proper time to pass this at this meeting. And I only will add also that I appreciate one of the speakers who was talking about removing the section. Well, let me put it the other way: is that the owner occupancy requirement should be retained, and that's been vetted a long time. That went through the whole process. We had a lot of input on that, and I would pass a really scrutinizing eye if that comes back up, eliminating the owner occupancy. It sounds like territory that we have visited. We went through a whole process with the neighborhoods. That's what our previous people and some of us actually decided at that time, and I don't think we're ready to change that at this time. So that's just a note, I suppose, for planning staff and the planning commission about at least what they can expect from me if it comes up, eliminating that owner occupancy requirement.
Okay, Councilmember Singh.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm good with remanding it. That makes sense to me. But I would like to hear from Mr. Marlowe on if there is anything, you were making a lot of different changes. Is there something you'd like to suggest for us to send it back?
Well, so over the weekend, I think it was maybe Thursday, Cheryl, I met with you and got a peek at the mayor's proposal, and I think that there were some good parts there that could be adapted. I was surprised the mayor's proposal didn't have ADUs at all mentioned. And so in addressing some of Roberto's concerns and today Tommy's concerns, I revamped this today twice. The most recent version I distributed to all of you just before council, and it leaves the owner-occupied in place everywhere outside of TDR, which is basically inside the older neighborhoods of Knoxville. It returns the size to 40% limit, except in areas where the primary structure is smaller, and it sets a floor that it could be 5,000 or 500 square feet. But in those smaller ones, it limits it to one bedroom, so we don't get crazy little rooms and trying to maximize everything. And it puts the one parking space back in from my original proposal, but eliminates it inside the TDR area. And then on the maximum height, I came to the same compromise that I offered to Planning Commission that fell on deaf ears. If we don't really need 30, 24 is what several architects have told me makes the garage with the apartment above it work. 18 is just too small unless you start hanging dormers off both sides. 24 would work, and it keeps it as small as practical for a design standpoint. So I would ask you if you could amend this to send this best version that's come out of a lot of input and feedback to Planning Commission so that we sort of go with our best foot forward, if you will.
I hear what you're saying, but I feel like that's something that at planning, there can be more time spent on that. I like all of your amendments.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Ryder.
Yeah. Since several have made comments about the owner occupancy and we've asked Mr. Aarons about the enforcement, I just want to make a few comments about that for the record. Owner occupancy with an ADU is about getting a permit to actually build a structure. It's not about who occupies it. I could build an ADU, and that is what Mr. Aarons was alluding to. I could build an ADU. I have to prove that I own the property and live there. Mr. Aarons, I have to prove that I own the property and live there. My address on my driver's license matches to pull a permit with your department. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
But then once I've built it, there is no check to see that I still live there, correct?
That is correct.
So let me give you a scenario. I own 229 East Scott, but I also own 223 East Scott. I could change my address to 223 East Scott, go down and get a new driver's license. I could come into your office or go online. I could fill out an application to build an ADU in the backyard of 223 East Scott, correct? Because that's my address.
Yes, ma'am.
Maybe I don't like living with my husband anymore. I can live next door. Okay, so I build an ADU. I do like him. But I build an ADU, and then I decide to change my address to 1514, another property I own on the other side of Broadway. And I can pull an ADU permit over there, correct? Because your only authority is to check and see that's where I live and I have matching documents. Is that correct? Once I've built them, you're not verifying who lives there.
That's correct, but I will say that our staff that monitor this, I'm confident that by the third time they would pick up on it.
Okay, so those are all in the 4th
Right,
district.
but
I just want to point that out. I wouldn't move my district.
I think what's maybe more realistic is you create an ADU and you realize your property is very marketable and you just sell it.
Okay,
And the next person, we don't track the sale of homes
right.
in the city. I think that's probably more reasonable to expect rather than somebody going down and changing their driver's license every third week. But
I can't build them that fast. I don't have that kind of.
But I think that's a real issue is you build a marketable property and it's sold and we don't track the sale of homes. I think that's the part
And so it
that
exists.
becomes problematic.
Or I could go buy a property with an ADU, but you're not tracking and monitoring whether I live there and whether I rent it out. What I'm hearing from constituents, even the constituents that emailed asking, having opinions on this, the concern was short-term rentals in ADUs. It wasn't whether I build an ADU at the property next door to me or all the different properties that I own. And part of the reason I want to point this out, Mr. Aarons, I realize you're not in the business of enforcing short-term rentals. Number one, I am not a giant fan of short-term rentals, and we've talked about that, is because that's taken up housing for people that come here and tell us they need housing. Short-term rentals is turning our residential areas into hotels and commercial areas, which is not what we want. We've also heard that that's very difficult for us to regulate as well. I think it's more difficult to regulate the pulling a permit, or I could go buy any house on the market that happens to have an ADU, and you can't regulate me making it owner occupied. On a different side of the coin, I could own a 700 square foot small working class house that needs a lot of repair. And you could say, well, you can't pull an ADU permit there and build an ADU. You just have to have a 700 square foot house. Well, I'm at the tipping scale. I could tear it down and build something bigger, a 3-2, 3-bedroom, 2-bath. I could tear it down and build a duplex within our code. But I can't keep that 700 square foot affordable house and rent it out and then build an ADU in the backyard because we've decided that I can't go down and pull a permit to do that because I don't live there. And that doesn't make sense to me. I could tear it down and get rid of affordable housing and build a duplex, but I can't keep the affordable housing and build an ADU in the giant backyard of a 50-foot by 150-foot duplex. And or a lot. And I find that odd to wrap my head around, because the real issue, what I'm hearing from the constituents who all emailed me, is they don't want to see ADUs used as short-term rentals. So to me, that's the issue. And I'm going to go on the record, and Vice Mayor, you know this, I seconded your motion in 2018. But having much more time and looking at different scenarios, the owner occupancy thing is very troubling to me, because it's about short-term rentals. It's not about me building an additional unit of housing for my parent, or heck, maybe I don't want my mom to live in the backyard of my yard. Maybe I want her to be in the backyard of one of my other properties. So, because apparently I'm one of those terrible people that provides housing. By the way, that was one of the comments earlier tonight, is that people that provide rentals are bad people. I do take issue with that.
Councilmember Smith.
Well, as a non-bad person, let's close this off here. I think, so in lieu of us recoding tonight, and hearing the applicant's desire to take his best and brightest to planning staff to consider, I don't know what words I need to use, Mr. Swanson, but I would make a motion that we do that, so that his application can be reviewed as he now intends to. We're not going to give him direct feedback now. Some of us have already. I think, if possible, the applicant deserves the right to submit this back to planning.
Councilmember Smith, I think that remanding it, and with Amy Brooks here, she will be able to take into account those substantive changes. I mean, Ms. Brooks.
I think formally to do so would be important.
Well, we're not the applicant. Mr. Swanson, can you speak to that?
Well, I think the motion to remand will accomplish what you want to accomplish. Certainly, Mr. Marlowe is free to accompany it back and to offer any suggestions, any changes, any amendments that he thinks now, upon further reflection, are appropriate. And I assume that the planning folks will make sure that those are considered. And then they will come up with their best recommendation to make to the commission, and then the commission will do whatever it does.
So are we not allowed to do what I just suggested? I can read verbatim it into the record and have it done, correct? If I need to? I don't think we need to do that, do we?
But you're amending something and you're not passing it. So I think that makes it very complicated, because what you're asking
we can't amend
the
it.
Planning Commission to do is to reconsider this and take a look at it a second time around.
So we can't amend and remand.
You're going to get it back here again.
But Mr. Swanson, that wasn't my question. Can we amend and remand?
Can you amend and remand?
Back to planning, yes.
You can try it, but it doesn't make any sense to me. No, I don't think it's the proper method to send it back to MPC, because MPC has its statutory obligations that we don't tell them what to do at the outset. We tell them what to do later. So you can ask them to consider this. If you want to remand it and ask them to consider X or X and Y or X and Y and Z, that is a proper motion.
Okay.
But you don't amend it here. You just you just remand it and ask them to consider changing it and looking at X, Y, and Z.
Okay, well then I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Whatever you just said.
Okay.
I'll second. Don't we have
Okay.
We have
So
we have a motion on the floor. Whoa, we have Andrew's motion on the floor to remand. So I assume, I'm going to play lawyer because I slept at Holiday Inn Express. I think you have to make a friendly amendment to include the latest version being the version that is remanded back. He would have to agree with it, and then there we go.
Well, seeing as that I'm not a landlord, I'll make that friendly amendment.
I'm not either.
Okay.
No offense, it's late.
I don't accept that. As much as I respect and appreciate what my colleague is doing, I don't accept that as a friendly amendment, because we are doing what we just said we don't want to do, which is making something that is very complex on the fly and then not providing notice regarding it and not giving public input. But what I would recommend my colleague does is what I heard from our law director, which is in the bounds of the remand, if you would like Planning Commission to consider something, to just read that into the record now and say, I would appreciate it if when staff reviews this, you would consider the following things. And I think that accomplishes what you want. That would be my recommendation.
With respect, there's no public notice for that type of informal addition. So for Planning Commission staff, please watch this and do what I'm asking. We'll move on. I just have a hard time sending something back formally that's publicly noticed that the applicant does not want before that body. It makes no sense. We're sending something back to them. I trust Director Brooks' talented team, but we're formally sending something back that the applicant's not asking for and has waited long enough to have this provided back. He's collected input from us, and for us to intentionally send something back that he's not asking for creates a headache for somebody else.
Director Brooks, when it seems like this is going to be remanded back to your staff and then back to Planning Commission, as part of your review, will you go on the record and say you will consider Mr. Marlowe's, some of the changes and elements? I mean, it's all just changes around these same elements, and your staff would consider those as you review this. Like, what's the best path forward that will eventually come back to council based on your recommendation?
Yes, and we will consider Mr. Marlowe's changes if he so wishes to submit those to us as part of the review. Is that sufficient?
Yeah, that and also I think council has said, I want you to also work with our staff to understand these elements. I mean, Mr. Marlowe is very smart, but he has just one person and one person's experience and perspective, and so having the perspective of our plans, reviews, and inspection teams and your team and others will create a better process. And it is complicated, which is one reason why we didn't do it right in the middle of the missing middle thing, because it's a complicated aspect to it.
Correct. I have a list of items that you all have discussed this evening, and we often do go back and watch these again before we present any recommendations when things are remanded back to the Planning Commission.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is to remand this back to Planning, Staff, and Commission. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
12C is an ordinance to close an unnamed street from Houstonia Drive to its western terminus, located along the northern border of parcel 058JA00101 and the southern border of parcel 058GF033, and authorizing the mayor to execute quitclaim deeds to the adjacent property owners. Mark Edward Bass, applicant, 4th District.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12D is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 0 and 237 Chickamauga Avenue from RN2 District to RN3 District, leaving all special purpose and overlay districts unchanged. Damon Falconeer, applicant, 5th District.
Mayor, I think we have some speakers signed up. I'd like to hear from them first.
Yeah, there are, I think, 3 people signed up to speak in opposition to this. The first one is Matt Morlock. Mr. Morlock, please state your name and address for the record, and you'll have up to 5 minutes.
Matt Morlock, Chickamauga Avenue, 261 Chickamauga Avenue, which, as you might notice, is right next to the parcel in question. And I'm here to request that you deny this rezoning request. I wrote a long thing, but after this meeting tonight, I want to talk about that bridge. Just kidding. But anybody that knows the street, that knows the neighborhood, knows that there aren't any crazy high density developments in the neighborhood, because it's a very well-developed neighborhood. Councilman Thomas has really helped usher along some really responsible zoning there. And the developer in question, who is not here tonight, is trying to pack 7 units onto a tiny parcel, and it's just too much. I think that the neighborhood association has vehemently opposed it. You're going to hear from a couple of other neighbors that have shown up for every planning commission meeting and the meeting here tonight. Nobody has shown up in favor of this other than the developer and his agent. And while we don't oppose higher density development, 7 units is just too high. We would definitely approve anything like a duplex or a triplex on that lot. And that's really boring compared to all the other stuff you talked about. But I don't think it's a good idea to allow this to get bumped up for zoning. That's it. But with that $20 million, I bet you could put a bar and a sandwich shop in here for those of us who skip dinner for these meetings. Make it a lot more interesting. But thanks for considering this, and thank you so much for spending all your time with all this stuff. I haven't been to any of these meetings, and holy crap. Thanks, all y'all. So, all right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next person signed up to speak in opposition is Wes Breitenbach.
Wes Breitenbach, 726 Chickamauga Avenue. It's pretty exciting to watch all the checks and balances of our local government happening here tonight. I rode my bike here tonight and from the Oakwood Lincoln Park neighborhood, and you get to see a lot of the diversity that happens in those couple of hills, the changes of the neighborhood. They're very distinct. You can see each neighborhood and the qualities and characters that they have. I'd fight for each one of those neighborhoods the same way I'm fighting for my own. I love this neighborhood, Oakwood Lincoln Park, and that's one of the things that really attracted me to it. Not only my home, but my business is there. We decided to try to keep it there because of the passion that people have for this neighborhood and the commitment that we have for this neighborhood. We fought really, really hard to get a historic overlay. We didn't want to be a historic, we wanted to keep it a working class neighborhood, but we wanted to have the protection of not having what happened in the 80s and 90s where these houses were popping up that clearly don't belong, because you can drive around the neighborhood and see what was built and when it was built. There's a lot of questionable houses that are there, and we wanted to stop that. This property has got so many issues with it, trying to develop it in the way that they're trying to look at in their proposals. If they're putting this many houses, if you just look at the average household, they say that it has between 1.9 to 2.5, so we'll just agree on 2 children per household. That puts it at 7 houses there. That's 14 kids. If those kids have friends, that's quickly up into the 20s and 30s of kids. It's in 2 blind hills that come up to this property. There are no sidewalks within blocks of this property. I could see, like Matt mentioned, maybe a duplex, maybe a triplex. But we need to think about the unintended consequences of what Mr. Smith had mentioned earlier of some of these developments that we do, and things that we don't maybe not think about. We don't live in that neighborhood, and we don't think about the fact that to have a driveway to accommodate that has got to be 20 feet wide, because they're going to have trash service, and that's a big wide driveway and a lot of asphalt to have water running off of. And that neighborhood historically has issues with flooding, if you're familiar with it. So I definitely, absolutely 100% believe that you should be not approving this, that you should be against this. We're against this. There's nobody in the neighborhood that's for it. There's nobody that lives around there that's for it. And one of the things that this is also going to do with the overlay protection that we had assumed we had and hoped that it would have some teeth to it, if this pushes over and this does pass, that's not going to stop anybody else from doing the same exact thing, because they're all going to be coming here wanting to get their money. This is from a developer that is not from our community. They're coming in to take advantage of our community. They bought it at a very low price. They want to get as much money as they possibly can for it. They're not building a house to sell it to give someone else an advantage. They're going to be taking that money from our community, and it's going to be going to some investment firm somewhere else. It's not staying in this community. There's no good access to this plot to have this many houses. There's no bus station, there's no bus stop, there's no sidewalk, there's no way for people to get in and out other than this one driveway. It's kind of a little island. There's no grocery store, there's no mini mart, there's nothing close to this. If this was on the periphery, like on the Broadway side or the central side, those would be areas that'd be a little more appropriate for a development like this, but not this lot. And so I'm really hoping tonight that we're gonna see the council side with the neighborhood that has voted for you guys and put you a lot here, put a lot of you people in these seats, that you're gonna side with us, and that you're gonna see us as a priority and not the dollar signs that this developer is seeing. Because that's all they see. They see the dollar signs. They come in, they're gonna build, they're gonna get their money, and they're gone. So we would appreciate that the hard work that this neighborhood has put into having this overlay and to have all these protections put in and to go through the rezoning, the recode and all of that other stuff, that we just sit with this for a little while before we just start changing things all over the place. Because I promise you, if this does get changed, you will have many more people just like this doing the exact same thing. So, thank you.
Thank you. The next person signed up to speak in opposition to this is Lee Hume. Is Mr. Hume still here? Okay. That's it. Oh. Okay, Michelle Ivester.
I know a lot of my neighbors, but that name is not familiar to me. Lee Hugh, I'm not sure. So you're gonna have to bear with me because I wrote a really pretty speech, and I'm gonna go ahead and read it all to you because I worked hard on it. Good evening, I'm Michelle Ivester. I live in Chickamauga Avenue. Excuse me. I'm the president of the Oakwood Lincoln Park Neighborhood Association and I'm here to advocate for my community. Many of my neighbors wanted to be here today, but unfortunately weren't able to do so because of their work or family commitments, and I had forgotten how freezing it gets in here after everybody closes out, so I wish I would have brought my blanket. Since my time on the OPNA board, I've been to a few hundred meetings, probably close to 1,000 now. I've attended numerous recode meetings, went to almost all of those, as well as hosted meetings to help ensure that our residents are informed about possible changes that might be happening in our neighborhood. Many of you may be aware that ours is an older neighborhood, and we have already overburdened infrastructure, which is one of the many concerns that is regarding this rezoning request tonight. Last month, concerned neighbors met briefly with the developer, who has since changed his request from rezoning from RN4 to RN3. However, this just seems to be an attempt to circumnavigate the process, because for what he has to do, he has to go do a special process to get the 7, so it would put it basically back to the RN4 again. So it's just a way to go around the system. And if you look on KGIS, you can see from both city and county zoning maps, all of the current zoning within a 1 to 2 block radius is low density, single family residence, except for that one lone apartment building that was built in the 90s. And allowing the change would be another case of spot zoning, which is really inappropriate. In preparation for this meeting, I looked over various missing middle plans, which seemed to be a possible compromise in this situation. And if a plan like those suggested were passed, there would actually be no need for rezoning. He could build a duplex or a triplex or even possibly a quad. It says even, I believe the mayor's proposal even would allow a townhouse with 3 to 4 apartments. Though larger than the existing surrounding homes, it would be a better fit for our established residential neighborhood than to cram 7 townhouses onto this little small lot that already has a house on it, by the way. OPNA is very aware of the current housing situation, and it seems that a missing middle proposal would be an optimal compromise to some extent. That being said, the missing middle and affordable housing are all catchphrases that I hear all the time. They seem to be the go-to wording for developers these days, but unless, and I can't stress this enough, unless the rents are such that the working class can afford them, then it's all just words used to manipulate our housing crisis. These proposed townhouses won't be aimed at the working class, and we've been told the owner won't accept any type of voucher or assistance for people that live there, which is worrisome. If the residents are pushed out of their homes because they can no longer afford them due to the increased property values, if that's built, excuse me, which in turn increases the property taxes, then we're no better off and the cycle of gentrification continues. This property is a fairly recent acquisition for Mr. Nathan, who resides in California. He purchased it in November of 21 and then transferred it to his corporation in August of 22. It would seem that there was no regard for the property zoning or any consideration of the neighborhood at all before the property was obtained, and that's an oversight on his part, but one that the neighborhood should not be penalized for. Poor planning or lack thereof or self-created hardship should not be considered as a valid reasoning for rezoning, especially in an established older residential neighborhood such as ours. If this rezoning is approved, the developer would be allowed to put in just about whatever they want, and it actually says that on his plan. Oh yeah, we might put that in front of them, but we can change it if we want to once we get our zoning through. A lot of people don't understand that. As I mentioned before, and with appropriate missing middle housing plan, there may be no need to have the property rezoned if the missing middle plans go through. And I've heard a lot of great feedback on a lot of them. Again, I'm here representing Oakwood Lincoln Park residents. Thank you for listening for our concerns, and we'd appreciate you voting no for the rezoning tonight. Thank you.
Council members, that concludes the people who signed up to speak to this agenda item. Councilmember Thomas.
Yes, I just want to make some brief remarks, and then I'll open it up to my colleagues for discussion. First thing I want to say is that this area is an area that really benefited from recode. It was like the Wild West, pretty much, as far as zoning goes. The RN5, which is beside the parcel, is an example of what we were getting before then. It's turned sideways. It has a slab of parking lot from it. It doesn't fit in at all. We saw that stuff coming into our neighborhood. So the recode actually has stabilized the neighborhood, and in combination with infill housing guidelines, what we're seeing is lots being bought up and houses being built that are in compliance with the existing code. So density is growing in Oakwood Lincoln Park. It's growing steadily, but it's growing in a way that is consistent with that community feel and with the infrastructure. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to go by this particular lot. I really hope you did, because the topography is, it is blind hills. There's a sign there that warns people of hidden driveways. There's no sidewalks. CAT will eventually, we hope, put a bus service by there, but at the moment they're not. And so, and I had a discussion with Ms. Brooks earlier, and I think we agreed on this, that under the existing code right now, more than likely, with 29,000 square feet, 2 duplexes could be built there. So you would have 4 units. The zoning change would only go up to 7 units, but it would be outside the constancy of developing the neighborhood in conformity with recode, which is working. So I know there's a huge concern, a valid concern for the housing problem and affordable housing and all that. And I've supported that in many ways. And in my district, I've supported it. And it depended on significant increases in solving that problem. There's a ribbon cutting in Inskip next week of 66 units of affordable housing.
This week.
I supported that. That was at the proper place in my district. Every place is site specific though, and this particular place is not going to knock a dent in the housing problem, and it's really going to significantly start undermining the process of what has happened in this neighborhood. Oakwood Lincoln Park now is a healthier neighborhood than it's ever been, and density is increasing. But recode worked here. That, in combination with the infill guidelines, has worked. So with that, I'll open it up to questions or discussions.
Just a point of information, the ribbon cutting for Inskip Flats is this Thursday. The ribbon cutting for Inskip Flats is this Thursday, 11:30, not next week. Next week, but sooner, so good. Any other questions or comments? I don't think there's a motion. There's not a motion on the floor.
I will make a motion to deny.
Second.
Okay, motion made to deny and has been made and seconded. Councilmember Parker?
Really, my question was, is there a motion on the floor?
Now there is. Any questions or comments about the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion to deny carries 8-1. Okay.
12E is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification for a property located at 602 Sitico Street from IMU District to CG1 District. Steve Jenkins, applicant, 6th District.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
12F is an ordinance to change the base zoning classification of property located at 0 Sanders Lane from RN2 District to RN4 District, leaving all special purpose and overlay districts unchanged. Don Horton, applicant, 6th District.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made to approve and seconded. Councilmember McKenzie?
Thank you, Mayor, and I just want to thank everyone that's hung in there with us throughout this meeting. I know that Stan Johnson and J.D. Jackson are here. Would you guys, one of you like to come up and just speak to this project? I know you guys have been doing a lot of good work in various communities.
Thank you. Stan Johnson, 1617 Dandridge Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee. We have partnered with Two Rivers Church and Trinity Foundation to really start looking at this project to build a 5-plex in our community to actually serve our low-income community. But our biggest thing is workforce development. So we're working with young people between the ages of 18 and 24 to help build these apartments. They're really townhouses, one-car garage, 1,700 square feet, 4-bedroom, things of that nature. We want to make sure that we have some great things in our community for our young people and our people that's in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, there are 3 people signed up to speak at public forum. The first is Mr. Givens. Is Mr. Givens present? Okay, next is Rick Roach. Mr. Roach?
Rick Roach, Knoxville. First thing is still disturbed by the departure of Brooklyn Belk from the police department. The back and forth of who, what, when, where, how was frankly disturbing. Of course, my only reference was the Knox News story, a story that was done by Ms. Dennis, I guess contributed to, with, it was, other people worked on it probably too. But the whole thing was disturbing, Chief, just because you felt the need to have to come back and rebut the story, to explain the story, or give your side of what happened. And that maybe speaks to the culture of the police department that you've spoken to, that you said that was probably one of the primary reasons bringing you in here was to change the culture of the Knoxville Police Department. And I think what we're for those that pay a little bit of attention to what goes on, and I've kind of turned into I guess a semi street dog, because people come up to you and they tell you stuff, and they ask you, did you see that happen, or are you noticing how things are? And what I've noticed is, especially since the new police station has gotten situated, and I guess the new safety center, if you will, gotten situated. East Knoxville especially is, I don't know, it feels like it's under siege sometimes. Just the presence, the police presence. And I know there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and that I know goes on because I'm familiar with the area. I'm not going to try to push my perception of what that's all about. But again, the way I look at the police department is that you are, at the end of the day, where you're law enforcement, yes, but you also policy enforcement. And you don't have much to do with policy. And maybe you do. I don't know. But at the end of the day, if your perception of how crime or potential crime is going down isn't jibing with the reality of how things are going down, and then we have to deal with the culture aspect of it, then you're going to have less cooperation within the community in terms of getting things squared away and done. Making it safer, making it a safer community. And that's where I'm hearing people comment. Like I say, city hasn't truly recognized the influx of policies that cause homelessness. And the homeless population in East Knoxville, it may be a little bit more spread out, but it's there. And they kind of blend in with the community. And it's hard to tell them apart. And we're seeing the effect of this every day. And I've seen multiple pictures, visions of people who now, I saw the
Mr. Roach, that's 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Last person signed up to speak at public forum is Nikki Lynn. Ms. Lynn?
Good evening. So I kind of want to apologize for last time. I am angry, and I believe I'm rightly so. But let me give you an update on my neighbors. So we came here at the beginning of August. This entire section was filled with renters, and it spurred because Rand Properties purchased my apartment complex at Tillery Drive. Now we're seeing elderly and veterans being served with eviction notices. I can say that again, right? We're seeing veterans and elderly with disabilities facing evictions. This isn't, we're projecting it's going to happen. It's happening. Let that sink in. So there's some things that we can do. Not that I want to talk about bridges again, but it's something here. We're talking about improving communities and we're talking about homelessness, and we're talking about moving through spaces safely and supporting those in need. Pedestrian bridge isn't going to do that, but putting in sidewalks on blind hills will. That's going to help. Providing that $20 million to homeless services organizations. Just a thought. I know that the last 2 meetings that you all have approved money to give to VMC, which is great. I know the work that they're doing is fantastic because I also work in homeless services. Shower trailer is important. Shower trailer is really important. It speaks to dignity, you know, being able to stay clean. People not walking away from you because you smell. It's a thing. But here's the other problem we're facing. Is if we can't issue rent control, and as we've demonstrated from the last public forum, and we can't call 211 because they have no resources to give, because the nonprofit organizations don't have the money. What can we do with $20 million? I'm just saying. So now I have 2 neighbors that are facing eviction. I don't know if you're aware of where they can move and what resources they have to them. But right now I can tell you they don't have anything available to them. VMC's, the money that was going to help with emergency shelter from last session was spent before they walked in here because they want to ensure emergency shelter. This was essentially reimbursement back to them. They're going to keep running the mobile shower trailer because it has to happen, because we're not addressing the issue here, and it's housing, affordable housing. So I took a look at the development report from the Knox County Planning Commission, and all the properties that I saw highlighted were not affordable at all. They were all over $1,400 for a single bedroom apartment. My neighbors that are getting evicted can't afford that. Where are they going? So I urge you to drive down Broadway tonight on your way home, because I guarantee you all our homeless are not in CARM or Salvation Army. They're going to be sleeping on the streets. And my neighbors are probably going to join them in the next 2 months. Thank you. I yield my time.
Council, that concludes the people signed up for public forum, and without objection, this meeting is adjourned.